Chapter 1. The Stagecoach Heist. The Texas sun hung like a copper penny in the bleached sky, baking the scrubland until the air shimmered and danced above the red dirt road. Rebecca Darby adjusted the bandana over her nose, the rough cotton already damp with sweat and nerves. Her father's old Stetson sat low on her brow, casting her green eyes in shadow as she watched the dusty ribbon of road from behind a cluster of prickly pear cactus. "Miss Rebecca, I can't see nothing through this." 10-year-old Timothy's voice was muffled behind his oversized bandana, which kept slipping down his freckled nose. He sat astride the old paint mare, looking more like a child playing dress-up than an outlaw. "Chill," Rebecca hissed, though she had to suppress a smile. Beside Timothy, 12-year-old Miguel fidgeted with the ancient rifle that was nearly as tall as he was. The weapon had last been fired during the Mexican-American War, and Rebecca prayed they wouldn't need to use it. The thing was more likely to explode than shoot straight. The sage-scented breeze carried the distant rumble of wheels and hoofbeats. Rebecca's heart kicked against her ribs like a Mustang in a too-small corral. This was it. Those Eastern lawyers had been circling the Darby ranch like vultures for 3 months, ever since Mama and Papa died. Word in town was that some fancy-pants attorney from back east was bringing forged documents on today's stage. Papers that would somehow prove her parents had sold drilling rights to that Egyptian oil tycoon before they died. Over her dead body. "Remember," Rebecca whispered urgently, "we take the briefcase. We leave everything else. In and out, quick as jackrabbits." "But Miss Rebecca," Miguel said, his dark eyes wide above his bandana. "What if they shoot at us?" "They won't shoot children," Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. "Now get ready." The stagecoach rounded the bend, its wheels grinding through the rust-colored dirt, pulled by 4 sweating horses. Dust devils swirled in its wake, carrying the smell of horse sweat and leather. Rebecca dug her heels into Kappa's flanks, and her chestnut mare burst from cover with a whinny that was probably more enthusiastic than menacing. "Stand and deliver," Rebecca called out, trying to lower her voice to sound masculine. It came out more like a strangled cat. Timothy and Miguel thundered up beside her, the paint mare veering left while Miguel's spotted pony decided this was an excellent time to stop and investigate a particularly interesting tuft of grass. "I said halt." Rebecca brandished her pistol, unloaded, thank the Lord, while Miguel struggled to aim the ancient rifle in approximately the right direction. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, hauled on the reins with a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of dust. One of the horses stamped nervously, its bridle jingling. The door swung open, and Rebecca's breath caught. The man who emerged was nothing like the weaselly, spectacled lawyer she'd imagined. He unfolded from the coach with the grace of a big cat, tall and lean in a suit that probably cost more than her entire herd of cattle. His skin was sun-bronzed, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and those cheekbones, Lord have mercy. His wavy black hair was slightly disheveled from travel, and when he looked at her, his dark eyes glinted with something that looked suspiciously like amusement. "Well," he said, his voice rich and warm as bourbon, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't quite place. "This is unexpected." Timothy's bandana had slipped entirely off, revealing his gap-toothed face. Miguel was still wrestling with the rifle, which had gotten tangled in his horse's mane. "Your briefcase," Rebecca demanded, keeping the pistol steady despite the way her hands wanted to shake. "Hand it over. Now." The stranger's lips quirked into a smile that did entirely inappropriate things to her pulse. He glanced back into the coach, then at her, one elegant eyebrow raised. "My briefcase? You're certain that's what you want? Don't toy with me, mister. The briefcase. Now, not the strongbox full of bank notes." He nodded toward the trunk strapped to the back of the coach. "That's not even locked properly. The latch is broken. You could have $10,000 in your hands in 30 seconds. Rebecca's mind stuttered. 10,000. But she forced herself to focus. "I don't want your blood money. Just the briefcase." Fascinating. He reached back into the coach with maddening calm, retrieving a leather briefcase that gleamed like polished mahogany in the harsh sunlight. As he stepped forward to hand it to her, The driver made a sudden movement. "Don't you give those bandits nothing," the old man shouted, reaching for his shotgun. Everything happened at once. Miguel's horse spooked, rearing with a terrified whinny. The ancient rifle discharged with a deafening boom and a cloud of acrid smoke. Timothy screamed. The stagecoach horses bolted forward, and the stranger was knocked aside, straight into the coach's rear wheel. The sickening crack was audible even over the chaos. No! Rebecca forgot about the disguise, forgot about the plan. She leaped from Kappa's saddle as the stranger crumpled to the ground, clutching his left leg. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark as wine against his white shirt sleeve. "Miguel, Timothy, unhook the horses. Now!" She knelt beside the fallen man, her hands hovering uselessly. His face had gone pale beneath his tan, jaw clenched against the pain. "That," he said through gritted teeth, "was not how I expected this day to go." "Hush, let me see." Rebecca pulled his hand away, her stomach lurching at the sight of the gash below his knee. The wheel's iron rim had laid him open from foot to knee, the white edge of bone visible through the torn flesh. Behind her, she heard the thunder of hoofbeats as the unhitched horses galloped away, the driver and his companion shouting curses that would have made her mother faint. The two were wresting the money box off the back of the stage. "Damn," she muttered. She tore a length off the bottom of her skirt and quickly began wrapping it tightly around his bleeding leg. "Miss Rebecca?" Timothy's voice wavered with fear. "We gotta go." She made her decision in a heartbeat. "Timothy, you and Miguel ride hard for the ranch. Tell Jesus what happened. Bring the medical kit and meet me at Widow's Creek." "But, go." She turned back to the stranger, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Can you ride?" "Can I? What are you doing?" "Taking you with me, apparently, though Lord knows why." Rebecca whistled sharply, and Copper trotted over, tossing her russet mane. "Can you mount with one arm? Or do I need to heave you up there like a sack of feed?" "I can manage." He staggered to his feet, swaying slightly. Rebecca steadied him, uncomfortably aware of the hard muscle beneath his expensive shirt, the warm scent of sandalwood, and something exotic that clung to his skin. "Who are you?" she asked as she helped him mount behind her saddle. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Even injured, his body was solid as oak. "Just a lawyer," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "Alessandro Farrick, but you can call me Alex." Her blood turned to ice. He was the Egyptian tycoon's lawyer, the man who'd come to steal her land. Rebecca's hand tightened on the reins until her knuckles went white. She'd just saved the life of her worst enemy, and now he was bleeding all over her favorite skirt, and his arms wrapped around her like they were lovers. She felt his heartbeat through her blouse, strong and steady despite his injury. Copper launched into a gallop, carrying them east toward Widow's Creek. Behind them, the driver's shouts faded into the dusty afternoon. Ahead, the setting sun painted the sky the color of a fresh bruise, purple and gold and threatening. "You know," Alex said, his voice strained with pain but still touched with that maddening amusement, "I'm fairly certain shooting a man and then kidnapping him is frowned upon, even in Texas." Rebecca didn't answer. She couldn't trust herself to speak because despite the fact that this man represented everything she was fighting against, she was acutely, painfully aware of every place their bodies touched. Chapter 2, Widow's Creek. The cabin crouched in a stand of twisted live oaks like something out of a ghost story, its weathered boards the color of old bone. Rebecca had discovered it 2 years ago while tracking a lost calf, abandoned since old widow Pritchard died without heirs. The windows were filmed with dust and spiderwebs, and the front porch sagged like a swayback mule, but the roof was mostly sound and the door still had a working latch. Good enough. She reined Copper to a halt, and Alex's arms tightened reflexively around her waist as the horse stopped. His breathing had gone shallow, and she could feel tremors running through his body where he pressed against her back. "End of the line, counselor," Rebecca said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can you dismount? Or are you going to make me drag you off like a roll carpet?" "Your hospitality is overwhelming," Alex muttered, but he was already sliding down, or rather, falling in what he probably hoped looked like a controlled descent. His injured leg buckled the moment it took his weight, and he grabbed the saddle horn with a hiss of pain. Rebecca was off Copper in a heartbeat, ducking under his good arm to take his weight. Easy. I got you. Do you? His voice was tight with pain, but there was still that thread of amusement running through it. Because from here, it looks more like I've got you. She could feel the heat of him through her shirt, the hard muscle of his torso pressed against her side. He smelled like expensive cologne mixed with blood and honest sweat. She half dragged, half carried him toward the cabin. The cabin door groaned in protest as she kicked it open. Dust motes exploded into the air, dancing in the amber light that slanted through the grimy windows. The single room smelled of mouse droppings and dry rot. A rough-hewn table dominated the center, flanked by two ladder-back chairs that had seen better days. A stone fireplace took up most of one wall, its hearth black with ancient soot. "Charming," Alex said as Rebecca lowered him into one of the chairs. It creaked ominously under his weight. "Hush and sit still." She turned to assess the room with a critical eye. They'd need water. There was an old pump out back that might still work. Bandages. Something to clean the wound. And she need light to stitch him up properly. The thunder of hoofbeats outside made her hand fly to her pistol. But then Timothy's voice rang out. "Miss Rebecca, we got the kit." The boy burst through the door, his too large bandana now tied around his neck like a desperado's neckerchief. His freckled face flushed with excitement and fear. Miguel followed more cautiously, lugging the battered medical kit that had seen them through everything from barbed wire cuts to that time old Jesus got kicked by a mule. Miguel's daddy's coat hanging past his knees. His eyes went wide as wagon wheels when they saw Alex slumped in the chair, his legs stretched out in front of him, blood dripping steadily onto the dusty floorboards. "Holy Moses," Timothy breathed. "Is he going to die?" "Not if I can help it." Rebecca snatched the kit from Miguel's hands. "Timothy, there's a pump out back. Bring me every drop of clean water you can. Miguel, see if you can get a fire going in that hearth. I'll need to sterilize a needle." "A needle?" Alex's voice had an edge to it now. "Please tell me you're joking. You want to keep that leg or not?" Rebecca knelt beside him, pulling out her knife. The blade flashed in the dusty light as she began cutting away his trouser leg. The fabric was fine wool, probably imported, probably cost more than she made in a month. She destroyed it without a second thought. Then she gently unwrapped the fabric she had wrapped around his wound. "I'm quite attached to it." "Actually," Alex said. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin, along with all my other parts. "Then sit still and try not to faint. I've stitched up horses, cattle, and one very stupid ranch hand who thought he could wrestle a bull. You can't possibly be worse than any of them. Your confidence is inspiring." The wound was worse than she'd feared. The gash ran from his knee to nearly his ankle, deep enough in places that she could see the pale gleam of muscle beneath. It was still bleeding sluggishly, and the edges were ragged, would need to be cleaned thoroughly before stitching or infection would set in faster than a prairie fire. Rebecca became aware that both boys were staring, Miguel's brown face gone slightly green. "Boys!" She kept her voice firm. "Water. Fire. Now." They scattered like startled quail. She looked up at Alex, who was watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter in ways that had nothing to do with blood or injuries. Up close, his face was even more striking. Those high cheekbones, the strong nose, the full mouth currently pressed into a thin line of pain. "This is going to hurt," she said simply. "I gathered." He reached over and gripped the edge of the table with his left hand. "Just get on with it before I change my mind about being brave." "You think you're being brave?" Rebecca pulled out a bottle of whiskey from the medical kit. Jesus's private stock, meant for sterilizing wounds and occasionally sterilizing the doctor himself. "Wait until I pour this on." "Oh, good Lord." She didn't give him time to prepare. The whiskey hit the wound with a hiss, and Alex's entire body went rigid. A sound escaped him that was somewhere between a curse and a prayer, in a language she didn't recognize. "Breathe," Rebecca ordered, using the same tone she used with spooked horses. "In and out. That's it. You," he gasped, "are a sadist. I'm saving your leg, counselor. A little gratitude wouldn't kill you." Neither would a warning. Rebecca felt her lips twitch. Where's the fun in that? Timothy returned with a bucket of water that sloshed over the sides with each step, soaking his oversized boots. Miguel had managed to coax a small fire to life in the hearth, feeding it twigs and dried leaves with the careful concentration of a prospector panning for gold. Rebecca set to work cleaning the wound with ruthless efficiency, ignoring Alex's occasional sharp intakes of breath. The water in the bucket turned pink, then red. She worked in silence, aware of his eyes on her face, of the way his breathing gradually steadied as he mastered the pain. "You're good at this," he finally said. His voice was rough, stripped of its earlier amusement. "Had practice." She didn't look up. "Ranch life isn't for the squeamish. Is that what you are? A rancher?" "Among other things." She risked a glance at him. "Apparently, I'm also an outlaw now." "That's new." "Yes, about that." Alex shifted in the chair, then immediately regretted it, his face going white. "Why my briefcase? Why not the money?" Rebecca's hands stilled. She'd almost forgotten about the briefcase in all the chaos. It was still tied to Kappa's saddle, and she'd bet her last dollar it was full of those forged documents. "Let's just say I heard rumors," she said carefully, "about some fancy Eastern lawyer coming to town with papers that would steal a certain ranch out from under its rightful owner." Understanding dawned in his dark eyes, followed by something that might have been respect. "The Darby Ranch. You're Rebecca Darby." It wasn't a question. She met his gaze steadily, her chin lifting in unconscious defiance. "And you're the man trying to take it from me." "I'm not trying to." He stopped, reconsidered. "It's more complicated than that. It always is with lawyers." She turned back to thread the needle, holding it in the fire's flame until it glowed. "Which is why you're not leaving this cabin. Not for a few days at least." "Excuse me." "You heard me." Rebecca turned back to him, needle in hand. "That leg won't hold you for 5 miles in any direction. You'd collapse before you made a quarter mile, and then the coyotes would have you. Or the wolves. We've got a pack that runs these hills, and they can smell blood for miles. So I'm your prisoner. Call it protective custody." She positioned the needle at the edge of the wound. "This is going to hurt worse than the whiskey." "Boys, hold his shoulders." Timothy and Miguel scrambled to comply, their small hands pressing against Alex's shoulders with surprising firmness. "You're bringing children into this?" But his voice held more curiosity than accusation. "These children are orphans from my ranch," Rebecca said, "and they've seen worse than a little blood. Haven't you boys?" "Yes, ma'am," they chorused, though Timothy's voice wavered slightly. "Now, then, counselor," Rebecca met Alex's eyes one more time. "Bite down on this." She offered him a strip of leather from the medical kit. He took it with as much dignity as a man could muster under the circumstances. "You're enjoying this." "Maybe a little." She positioned the needle. "But I'm also saving your life. Try to remember that when you're cursing my name." The first stitch went in clean and true. Alex's entire body went rigid, and a muffled sound escaped around the leather. But he didn't pull away, didn't cry out, just gripped the table hard enough that his knuckles went white and fixed his eyes on something over her shoulder. Probably one of the dust-filmed windows, probably trying to transport himself anywhere but here. Rebecca worked with steady hands, each stitch pulling the ragged edges of flesh together. The room filled with the smell of blood and whiskey and wood smoke. Outside, the sun continued its descent, painting the cabin walls with golden light that slowly faded to amber, then to bronze. "Almost done," she murmured after what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. "Just a few more." "That's what you said 3 few mores ago." Alex managed around the leather. "Don't be a baby. I'm being stitched together like a torn saddle blanket. I'm entitled to be a baby." Despite everything, Rebecca laughed, a short, surprised bark of sound that made both boys jump. Alex's eyes found hers, and for a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. She tied off the final stitch and sat back on her heels, surveying her work. It wasn't pretty, but it was clean and tight. The bleeding had stopped, and the edges were aligned well enough that scarring should be minimal. "There," she said, reaching for the bandages. "You'll live. Thanks to you." Alex spat out the leather strap, working his jaw. though I'm still not entirely sure that was your original plan. It wasn't. Rebecca began wrapping his thigh with long strips of clean linen, trying not to notice the hard muscle beneath her hands or the way his sharp intake of breath had nothing to do with pain. But I'm not in the habit of letting men bleed to death, even if they're trying to steal my home. I told you it's complicated, and I told you it always is. She tied off the bandage with perhaps more force than necessary. There, keep it clean, keep it elevated, and for the love of God, don't try to walk on it. And if I need to, use the facilities? Rebecca's cheeks heated. There's a chamber pot under the bed. Miguel, Timothy, you're on nursing duty. Anything he needs, you fetch it. Understood? Yes, ma'am, they said in unison, looking less than thrilled with their assignment. She stood, wiping her bloody hands on a rag. The sun was nearly down now, the cabin filling with purple shadows. I need to get back before dark, or Jesus will send out a search party. There's water, and I'll bring food when I return. When you return, Alex struggled to sit up straighter. You're coming back? Someone has to make sure you don't die of infection and leave a corpse for me to explain. Rebecca gathered the medical supplies, avoiding his eyes. Besides, we have things to discuss. Like what's in that briefcase. I could tell you now. You could. She finally looked at him, this infuriating, attractive enemy who she just saved. But I'm too tired to hear more lies today. We'll talk tomorrow. She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the latch. Oh, and counselor, don't even think about leaving. Like I said, wolves. They run in packs around here, and they're always hungry. I wasn't aware Texas wolves had developed a taste for lawyers. There's a first time for everything. She pulled the door open, then looked back one more time. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Part frustration, part admiration, part something else entirely that made her pulse quicken in ways she absolutely could not afford. Rebecca, he said, using her first name for the first time. The way his accent shaped it, soft and rolling, did dangerous things to her composure. Thank you. Truly. She wanted to say something cutting, something to remind him they were enemies, that this changed nothing. Instead, she just nodded once and slipped out into the gathering darkness. Copper was waiting where she'd tied her, and Rebecca mounted with the weary movements of someone who just lived through the longest day of her life. As she rode away from the cabin, she could feel Alex's eyes on her back, watching from the dusty window. Behind her, in the darkening cabin, she heard Timothy's voice float out on the evening breeze. Mr. Alex, sir, are you really going to steal Miss Rebecca's ranch? Rebecca urged Copper into a trot, her mind spinning. In her saddlebag, the leather briefcase bumped against her leg with each stride. Full of secrets, full of lies, full of whatever scheme the Egyptian oil tycoon had cooked up to steal her family's land. She should open it, should burn whatever documents were inside and scatter the ashes to the four winds. But something made her hesitate. Something in the way Alex had looked at her while she stitched him up. And that, Rebecca thought as the first stars began to appear overhead, might be the most dangerous thing of all. The night air smelled of sage and coming rain. Somewhere in the hills, a coyote howled, high and lonesome and wild. It was answered by another and another until the darkness sang with their voices. Rebecca touched her heels to Coppa's sides and rode for home, leaving the wounded prince disguised as a lawyer alone in the widow's cabin with two orphan boys and a pack of lies that might just be the death of them all. Chapter 3. The Briefcase. The ranch house was dark when Rebecca finally rode in, save for a single lamp burning in the kitchen window. Jesus's signal that he'd waited up, worrying. The old foreman had been with her parents since before she was born, and he treated her like the daughter he'd never had, which meant he felt entitled to lectures about foolish risks and stagecoach robberies gone wrong. She wasn't disappointed. Estás loca? He met her at the barn, his weathered face creased with concern and anger. Robbing a stagecoach? With children? What were you thinking? I was thinking about saving the ranch, Rebecca said wearily, sliding off Coppa's back. Her whole body ached. Muscles she didn't know she had were screaming in protest. Did the boys tell you what happened? See, they told me everything. About the lawyer, the injury, the cabin. Jesus took Coppa's reins from her hands, his dark eyes sharp in the lamplight. And apparently you left him there with just those two niños for company. Rebecca, I know. She pressed her fingers to her temples, where a headache was building like a summer thunderstorm. I know, Jesus. But what was I supposed to do? Let it bleed out? You were supposed to let him be the sheriff's problem, not ours. He's not the sheriff's problem yet. No one knows it was us. She hoped that was true. Timothy and Miguel had been masked, and she'd been careful. But hope and certainty were two different things. Besides, he can't walk. He's not going anywhere for at least a week. Jesus made a sound of disgust and turned to lead Copper into her stall. A week with that man in the widow's cabin. Do you know what kind of trouble that could bring? Less trouble than having him dead and the Egyptian tycoon sending more lawyers. Rebecca followed him into the barn, breathing in the familiar smells of hay and horse and leather. At least this way, I can see what's in that briefcase. Her eyes found the leather case still tied to her saddle, gleaming dully in the lamplight like a snake waiting to strike. Jesus saw where she was looking. You haven't opened it yet? I wanted to wait until I was home, until I could think clearly. She reached for the briefcase with hands that trembled slightly. Come on, let's see what lies he brought all the way from Egypt. The kitchen table became a battlefield. Rebecca spread the documents across the scarred surface while Jesus poured coffee strong enough to strip paint. There were deeds, contracts, letters of intent, survey maps, and page after page of legal language that made her eyes cross. But even without a law degree, she could see the problems. Look at this. She jabbed her finger at a supposed deed of sale. This says my father sold the mineral rights to the eastern section in March of 1884. But Papa was in San Antonio that whole month, helping Uncle James rebuild his store after the fire. I was with him. Jesus leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the document. And this signature, it's wrong. Your papa always made that big loop on the D in Darby. This is too small, too tight. Forged. She spat. She moved to the next document, her anger building with each page. In this survey map, it shows the creek running west of the old cottonwood, but anyone who knows the land knows it runs south. South, Jesus. Any surveyor worth his salt would know that. They're counting on no one checking, Jesus said quietly. On a judge back east who doesn't know Texas from Tennessee. Rebecca's hands curled into fists, crumpling the edges of the nearest document. That handsome, lying son of a... Rebecca. Jesus's voice held a warning. Your mama would wash your mouth out. My mama would load the shotgun. But she took a breath, trying to calm the fury that threatened to choke her. She pulled out a pencil and began marking the documents, circling discrepancies, noting dates and signatures that didn't match. Her handwriting grew increasingly sharp and angular as her anger built, until the margins were filled with accusations and corrections. By the time she finished, dawn was threatening the horizon with fingers of pink and gold. The coffee pot was empty, her eyes burned with exhaustion, and every document in that briefcase bore witness to her rage. I'm going to throttle him, she announced, gathering the papers back into the case. I'm going to ride back to that cabin and throttle him with my bare hands. After you sleep, Jesus said firmly. And after you eat. And after you bring him food, because even lying lawyers need to eat. I don't want to feed him. I want to throttle him. See, I heard. Jesus pulled out a basket from the pantry and began filling it with deliberate movements. But you'll do it on a full stomach and after some rest. Those boys need sleep too, and someone needs to relieve them. Rebecca wanted to argue, but her body was already making the decision for her. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow, the briefcase clutched to her chest like evidence at a trial. She awoke to afternoon sun slanting through her window and the smell of something glorious wafting up from the kitchen. Her stomach growled with a ferocity that made her realize she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Downstairs, Jesus had outdone himself. The basket he was packing held enough food for a small army. Roasted chicken, golden cornbread still warm from the oven, beans cooked with bacon and molasses until they were thick and rich, fresh tomatoes from the garden, a jar of peach preserves, and a still warm apple pie that made Rebecca's mouth water just looking at it. You're trying to fatten him up before I kill him? She asked, eyeing the feast. I'm being a good Christian, Jesus replied primly. Your mama would expect no less. My mama would expect me to defend what's ours. She'd expect you to do it with grace and dignity. He handed her the basket, heavier than it looked, and maybe, just maybe, to listen to what the man has to say before you throttle him. Rebecca wanted to argue, but the coffee and fury headache from the night before was still lurking behind her eyes. Fine, I'll listen. Then I'll throttle him. That's my girl. The ride to the widow's cabin seemed shorter in daylight. Copper knew the way and took it with the easy confidence of a horse heading somewhere that meant rest and water. Rebecca used the time to rehearse what she'd say, how she'd confront him with his lies, how she'd demand the truth. But when she pushed open the cabin door, basket in hand and fire in her eyes, all her prepared speeches died on her tongue. Alex was exactly where she'd left him, propped in the same chair with his injured leg elevated on a second chair that Timothy must have dragged over. But he looked worse, face pale beneath his bronze skin, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a night spent fighting pain. His shirt was rumpled, his hair disheveled, and there was a vulnerability to him that hadn't been there yesterday. Timothy and Miguel were curled up like puppies on the dusty floor near the fireplace, dead to the world. Their two big clothes acting as blankets, and Miguel was snoring softly. Alex's eyes opened when she entered, dark and alert despite his obvious exhaustion. Rebecca, just her name, but the way he said it made something flutter in her chest. I wasn't sure you'd come back. Someone has to make sure you haven't bled to death and traumatized the children. She set the basket on the table with more force than necessary. Also, she added tightly, I have some questions about your paperwork. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. I see you've been busy. Oh, you have no idea. She began unpacking the basket, suddenly aware that she was nervous. Nervous to feed him, nervous to confront him, nervous about the way his gaze followed her movements. Jesus insisted you shouldn't starve before I get the chance to throttle you. Thoughtful of him. Alex watched as she laid out the feast. His eyes widened slightly at the spread. This is considerable. Eat first, then we talk. She handed him a plate piled high with chicken, cornbread, and beans. You'll need your strength. He took the plate, and for a moment, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with things she absolutely could not afford to feel. She pulled back quickly, busying herself serving portions for the boys when they woke up. Alex took a bite of the chicken and went very still. Then another. Then he was eating with the single-minded focus of a man who'd forgotten what real food tasted like. Good Lord, he said around a mouthful of cornbread. This is incredible. What is this? Cornbread. You do have cornbread in Egypt, don't you? Not like this. He took another bite, his expression one of pure bliss. What did you do to it? Jesus's secret recipe. Rebecca found herself watching him eat. The cornbread has honey in it, and the beans are cooked slow with bacon fat and molasses. It's magnificent. He looked up at her, genuine appreciation in his eyes. Jesus is a remarkable cook. She pulled the briefcase onto the table with a heavy thud that made Alex's plate rattle. Now, about these documents. The warmth drained from his expression, replaced by something more guarded. He set down his fork carefully. I see. Oh, you'll see more than that. Rebecca opened the case and pulled out the first document, the forged deed of sale. Her markings covered it like a rash, circling every discrepancy, every impossibility, every obvious lie. This one claims my father sold mineral rights in March 1884. Care to explain how he did that while he was in San Antonio? Alex took the document, studying it and her annotations. San Antonio? Helping his brother rebuild after a fire. I was with him. We were gone the entire month. She slapped down another paper. And this signature? Wrong. Papa's signature had a distinctive loop on the D. This is too small, too cramped. A decent forger would have known that. I see. His voice was maddeningly calm. And this survey map, she was on a roll now, pulling out page after page, pointing out errors with increasing passion. The creek runs south of the cottonwood, not west. Any surveyor who actually walked the land would know that. And these witness signatures? Half these people were dead before the dates on these documents. Dead, Alex. Someone forged documents using the names of corpses. She expected denials, excuses, the slick lawyer's tongue trying to twist facts into fiction. What she got was silence. Alex studied each document she thrust at him with careful attention, his dark eyes moving over her notes, his expression unreadable. He asked quiet questions. Are you certain about the dates? Can you prove your father was in San Antonio? Do you have samples of his genuine signature? His calm was infuriating. His methodical examination of her evidence made her want to scream. Where was the guilt? The defensive posturing? The admission of wrongdoing? Well, she finally demanded, when she'd run out of documents to throw at him. Don't you have anything to say? I'm listening, he said simply. Continue. Continue? I've just proven that every single document in this briefcase is a fraud. These aren't legal papers. They're fiction. Lies designed to steal my family's land. And you have nothing to say? From the floor, Timothy stirred and mumbled, They're fighting again. Miguel giggled softly. They sound like old married folks. We are not. Rebecca started, but Alex cut her off with a raised hand. You're right, he said quietly. She blinked. On what? Right. About the documents. He set down the papers carefully, meeting her eyes with an intensity that stole her breath. They're fraudulent, poorly done. Actually, whoever created them was either incompetent or in a hurry, possibly both. Rebecca's anger, which had been burning so hot and bright, suddenly had nowhere to go. Then why? If you knew they were fake, why bring them? I didn't say I knew. I said you're right. He shifted in his chair, wincing as his injured leg protested. I suspected, but suspicion and proof are different things. That's a lawyer's answer. I'm a lawyer. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Among other things. What other things? She leaned forward, hands planted on the table. Who are you, really? Because no Eastern lawyer I've ever heard would admit his own documents are fraudulent. Alex opened his mouth, then closed it. Something warred in his expression, duty and desire, secrets and the need to share them. Finally, he said, That's a longer conversation than we have time for right now. We have nothing but time. You can't walk, remember? Even so, he looked toward the windows, where the afternoon sun was painting the dust motes gold. There are things I need to tell you, but not here. Not now. And certainly not. He glanced at the boys, who were definitely awake now and listening with rapt attention, with an audience. Timothy sat up, his hair sticking up in all directions. We ain't an audience. We're helpers. The best helpers, Miguel added loyally. Despite everything, Rebecca felt her lips twitch. They have a point. I'm sure they do. Alex's expression softened as he looked at the boys. And I appreciate your help, gentlemen. Truly. But Miss Rebecca and I need to have a private conversation. Adult matters. Adult matters. Timothy repeated in a mock serious voice that made Miguel dissolve into giggles. Rebecca felt heat creep up her neck. It's not like that. Sure sounds like it, Miguel said, his dark eyes dancing with mischief. You too. Rebecca pointed toward the door. Out. Go catch frogs or climb trees or whatever it is you do when you're not playing Outlaw. But Miss Rebecca, out. They went, but not before exchanging knowing looks that made Rebecca want to sink through the floor. Their laughter floated back through the open door, along with Timothy's stage whispered, I bet they'll be kissing by tomorrow. We will not. Rebecca called after them, her face burning. Of course not, Alex said mildly, but there was amusement in his voice. That would be entirely inappropriate. She whirled on him, ready with a sharp retort, but stopped when she saw his expression. He was trying not to smile, and failing. The sight of it, genuine, unguarded, did something dangerous to her composure. You're enjoying this, she accused. A little. He shifted in his chair again, and the smile vanished as pain flickered across his face. Though I'd enjoy it more if my leg wasn't on fire. Guilt rushed through her, dousing the last of her anger. Let me check the bandage. Rebecca, you don't have to. But she was already kneeling beside him, carefully unwrapping the linen she'd bound yesterday. The wound looked better than she'd feared. No signs of infection, edges holding together nicely. The stitches were straight and tight, and while the flesh around them was angry and red, it wasn't the hot, swollen red that meant infection was setting in. "It looks good," she said, more to herself than to him. Her fingers moved over his leg with professional efficiency, checking for heat, for swelling, for any sign of trouble. She was so focused on the wound that she didn't notice how still he'd gone, didn't see the way his hands gripped the chair arms. "Rebecca." His voice was strained. She looked up, suddenly aware of how close she was, of her hands on his bare leg, of the way his breath had gone shallow. "Am I hurting you?" "No." The word came out rough. "That's not the problem." Understanding dawned, and with it, a heat that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. She pulled her hands back as if burned, fumbling for the fresh bandages. Let me just. Take your time." But there was a tension in his voice that hadn't been there before, an awareness that sparked between them like flint on steel. She rewrapped the bandage with shaking hands, acutely conscious of every point of contact, every breath, every small sound. When she finally tied it off and stood, her legs felt unsteady. "There," she said, her voice not quite even. "That should hold for another day or two." "Thank you." He was watching her with those dark, intense eyes. "For everything. The stitching, the food, the accusations of fraud." "You're welcome." It came out like a question. "I mean it." He reached for the papers again, his expression growing serious. "These documents, you're right about all of it. And if you let me, I'd like to help you prove it." "Help me?" Rebecca stared at him. "Why would you help me? You work for the man trying to steal my land." "I work for him, yes. But that doesn't mean I agree with his methods." He met her eyes steadily. "And after seeing these documents, after your analysis, I'm beginning to think there's more to this situation than I was told." "So you didn't know they were fake?" "I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't have proof." He gestured to her marked-up papers. "Now I do. Thanks to you." Rebecca wanted to believe him. Lord, how she wanted to believe him. But she'd learned early that wanting something didn't make it true. Pretty words, counselor. "But how do I know you're not just telling me what I want to hear?" "You don't." He said it simply, without defensiveness. "You'll have to decide whether to trust me." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "The point is, we both have reasons not to trust each other, and we both have reasons to work together. The question is, which reasons are stronger?" She should have left then, should have gathered the boys and ridden back to the ranch, and put as much distance between herself and Alessandro Farrick as possible. Instead, she found herself sitting across from him, watching him eat with undisguised pleasure, listening to him ask questions about the ranch and her parents and the land that was worth fighting for. The sun moved across the sky. The cabin grew warm, then hot, then began to cool as evening approached. Somewhere outside, Timothy and Miguel were singing a slightly bawdy trail song they'd learned from the ranch hands, their young voices mangling the words in ways that would have made Jesus laugh. And inside the cabin, two people who should have been enemies sat across a scarred table and talked like old friends, while a briefcase full of lies sat between them like a bridge or a wall. "I should go," she said when the shadows grew long. "Get the boys home before dark. Before the wolves come out." There was humor in his voice now, easier than before. Something like that. She stood, gathering the empty dishes. The boys appeared as if summoned, somehow knowing their adventure was ending for the day. They'd lost the two big outlaw clothes somewhere and were back in their regular shirts and trousers, dusty and grass-stained and happy. "Mr. Alex told us stories," Timothy announced. "About Egypt. They got pyramids big as mountains. And camels," Miguel added. "Can we get a camel, Miss Rebecca?" "No camels." She ruffled his hair affectionately. "We can barely afford the horses we have. Come on, help me pack these dishes." The boys scrambled to comply, chattering about pyramids and pharaohs and deserts that stretched forever. Alex watched them with something soft in his expression, something that made Rebecca's heart do uncomfortable things. "They're good boys," he said quietly. "The best." She meant it. Their parents died of fever 2 years ago. No other family to take them in. So they came to us. "You took them in?" "You didn't have to." "Of course I did." She looked at him, surprised. What else would I do? Let them starve? End up in some orphanage back east where they'd be worked half to death? Most people would have, he said, found it easier to look away. Then most people are cowards. Something in his expression shifted. Respect. Yes, he said softly. I'm beginning to see that. Rebecca didn't know what to say to that, so she focused on settling him for the night. She brought him water, made sure the chamber pot was within reach, and helped him shift to a more comfortable position without putting weight on his injured leg. I'll be back tomorrow, she said, with more food, and probably more accusations. I look forward to both. He caught her hand as she turned to leave. His palm was warm, calloused in ways that surprised her, not the soft hands of a man who only worked with papers. Rebecca, thank you for not leaving me to the wolves. She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers curled around hers with a gentleness that made her throat tight. You're welcome, she managed. Try not to die before I come back. It'd be a waste of good stitching. I'll do my best. She pulled her hand free and fled before she could do something foolish like believing him. The boys were already mounted and waiting, their young faces knowing in ways that made her want to groan. They didn't say anything as she swung up on Akapa's back, but their smirks spoke volumes. Not a word, she warned as they started down the path. Not one word about Mr. Alex or pyramids or anything else. Yes, ma'am, they chorused far too innocently. Behind them, the cabin sat in a pool of golden evening light, and through the window, she could see Alex's silhouette, tall, even sitting down, watching them right away. Rebecca touched her heels to Kappa's sides and didn't look back. Tonight, she'd go home and try not to think about dark eyes and the way her hand had felt in his. Chapter 4. The Ranch. The clock on Rebecca's nightstand ticked like a hammer on an anvil, loud, insistent, mocking her attempts at sleep. Tick, tock, tick, tock. She rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling where moonlight painted silver patterns through the lace curtains her mother had hung a lifetime ago. The sheets tangled around her legs, suddenly too hot, too constricting. She kicked them off and tried lying perfectly still, convinced that if she just didn't move, sleep would finally claim her. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It didn't work. Her mind wouldn't quiet. It kept circling back to the cabin, to dark eyes watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter, to strong hands that had gripped the table while she stitched them up, to the way he'd said her name like it was something precious. Stop it, she muttered to the empty room. The clock answered, tick, tock. Rebecca flopped onto her left side, punching the pillow into submission. This position had always worked before, curled up like a child, one hand tucked under her cheek. But tonight her arm went numb after 5 minutes, and the pillow felt lumpy no matter how many times she rearranged it. She rolled onto her right side. Then her stomach, face buried in the pillow, arms spread like she was trying to fly. Her back protested immediately. She wasn't 16 anymore, and sleeping on her stomach made her spine ache. This is ridiculous, she told the pillow. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Back on her back. She tried counting sheep, but they kept turning into horses. Then the horses turned into a certain tall, handsome lawyer with wavy black hair and high cheekbones, and she had to start over. She hung her head over the edge of the bed, letting her hair spill toward the floor, watching the room from an upside-down perspective. The blood rushed to her head, making her dizzy. Maybe if she got dizzy enough, unconsciousness would be close enough to sleep. It wasn't. With a groan of frustration, she hauled herself upright, the head rush making spots dance in her vision. The clock read 3:47 a.m., which meant she'd been lying here for nearly 5 hours with maybe 20 minutes of actual sleep scattered throughout. That's it. She threw back the covers with more violence than necessary and padded barefoot to the window. The ranch spread out below her in shades of silver and shadow, the barn a dark hulk against the star-scattered sky, the corral fence posts standing like sentinels, the orphan boys' bunkhouse quiet and peaceful. Everyone else was sleeping. Everyone except her and that damn clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. She tried lying diagonally across the bed, her feet hanging off one corner. Tried curling into a ball in the center. Tried the left side again with a different pillow arrangement. Each position lasted maybe 10 minutes before some part of her body decided to protest. A cramp in her calf, a crick in her neck, her shoulder going numb. And through it all, that clock kept ticking, marking each second she spent thinking about things she absolutely should not be thinking about. Like the way Alessandro's accent softened certain words. Like the gentleness in his eyes when he talked to the boys. Like the fact that he'd admitted the documents were fraudulent without hesitation, without excuses, without the slick lawyer's double talk she'd been expecting. Like the warmth of his hand covering hers. Oh, for heaven's sake. Rebecca sat up again, running both hands through her hair until it stood up in wild tangles. She looked at the clock, 4:23 a.m., and seriously considered throwing it out the window. Instead, she let out a long, frustrated sigh that seemed to come from her toes, flopped back down one more time, and stared at the ceiling with the grim determination of a soldier facing battle. Sleep didn't come. At 5:15, when the first gray hints of dawn began creeping across the sky, she gave up entirely. Her nightgown was twisted around her like a rope, the sheets were in complete disarray, and she was fairly certain she looked like something that had been dragged backwards through a thorn bush. Fine, you win. She glared at the clock as if it were personally responsible for her misery, which in a way it was. That and a certain Egyptian lawyer who had no business occupying her thoughts like he'd paid rent. She dressed in the pre-dawn darkness, yanking on her split riding skirt and a simple cotton blouse with more force than necessary. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons, exhaustion making them clumsy, and she had to start over twice before getting them all fastened properly. Downstairs, she could already smell fresh coffee and baking biscuits. Of course, Jesus was up. The man seemed to run on 3 hours of sleep and pure stubbornness. She found him in the kitchen, his weathered hands working dough with the easy rhythm of long practice. The lamp cast warm light across the scarred wooden table, and the stove radiated heat that chased away the morning chill. "You look terrible," he said without looking up. "Good morning to you too." Rebecca poured herself coffee so strong it could dissolve a horseshoe. What gave it away? The fact that you're up before the roosters. The shadows under your eyes. The way you're glaring at that coffee cup like it insulted your mama. Now he did look up, his dark eyes knowing. "Want to tell me what kept you up all night?" "The clock." She took a gulp of coffee, burning her tongue. "That damn ticking clock." Hum. Jesus went back to his biscuits, but she could see the smile tugging at his mouth. "The clock. Nothing else?" "Nothing else," she lied. "So you weren't thinking about a certain injured lawyer in a certain cabin?" "Jesus. Just asking." He shaped the dough into perfect rounds with practiced efficiency. Because a man who admits his own documents are fraudulent, that's an unusual sort of man. The kind we're thinking about, maybe. "I'm going to the cabin," Rebecca announced, changing the subject with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. "Court is today." "Today?" Jesus's hand stilled. "You sure about that?" "Judge Morrison's docket. I checked last week." She set down her coffee cup with a thunk. "And you think the lawyer will help?" "He said he would." Rebecca met Jesus's eyes. "And against my better judgment, I believe him." "Your better judgment or your heart?" But it was said gently, without accusation. "My better judgment," she insisted. "My heart has nothing to do with it." "Of course not." Jesus pulled the biscuits from the oven, golden brown and perfect. "Here, take some to the cabin. Can't strategize on an empty stomach." He packed a basket while Rebecca tried to drink enough coffee to compensate for a sleepless night. The sky outside was shifting from gray to pink, the kind of dawn that promised a hot day ahead. Birds were starting to sing, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the boys beginning to stir in their bunkhouse. A normal morning, except nothing about today was going to be normal. "Rebecca." Jesus's voice stopped her as she reached for the basket. "Be careful, not just with the land and the court date. With him, I can handle Alessandro Ferrick. That's what worries me." He touched her shoulder briefly. "You've been handling things alone since your parents died. Maybe it's time to let someone help. But make sure it's the right someone." "I'll be careful," she promised, and headed for the barn. Copper was pleased to see her, nuzzling her shoulder and snorting warm breath against her neck. Rebecca saddled her in the growing light, her hands moving through the familiar motions while her mind raced ahead to the cabin, to Alex, to the impossible task of proving fraud. She was just leading Copper out of the barn when she heard it. Voices, multiple voices, and barking, lots of barking. What in the... The ranch dogs came first. Three mixed-breed mutts of indeterminate heritage who'd appointed themselves guardian of everything within 5 miles. They were barking like the world was ending, tails wagging so hard their whole back ends moved, dancing around something in the pre-dawn gloom. Then she saw them, Timothy and Miguel, leading 2 horses. And between those horses, looking like he was about to collapse but grimly determined, was Alessandro Farrick, using the horses for support as he limped up the ranch road. What? Rebecca dropped Coppa's reins and ran. What are you doing? You're supposed to be resting. Your leg. Good morning to you too, Alex said. He was pale in the dawn light, his jaw tight with pain, but there was a glint of something in his eyes, determination maybe or stubbornness. Lovely morning for a walk, don't you think? A walk. You can barely stand. She reached him just as his left leg buckled slightly. Her arm went around his waist automatically, steadying him. Timothy. Miguel. What happened? We was playing a game, Timothy announced cheerfully, looking far too pleased with himself for this hour of the morning. Mr. Alex said it was called Great Escape, and we had to help him break out of the cabin without getting caught by the guards. There were no guards, Rebecca said through gritted teeth. Pretend guards, Miguel corrected seriously. And we won. We got Mr. Alex all the way to the ranch without nobody catching us. Because nobody was trying to catch you. Rebecca glared at Alex, who had the grace to look slightly sheepish. You hijacked 2 children to bring you here? Are you insane? Possibly, he admitted. His weight against her side was considerable, and she could feel him trembling with the effort of staying upright. But I needed to see the ranch, to understand what we're fighting for. We're not. She stopped. They were fighting for the same thing now, weren't they? You couldn't have waited until I brought you here properly? Court date is today. You said so yourself last night. His dark eyes met hers. I needed to see it. Needed to understand the land, the operation, what makes this place worth forging documents for. And you thought a pre-dawn march on an injured leg was the way to do that. I thought, he said carefully, that sometimes you have to take risks to get what you need. Behind them, the dogs had finally calmed down enough to sniff Alex with intense interest. One of them, a shaggy beast they called General because he thought he was in charge, planted himself at Alex's feet and looked up adoringly. Even the dogs like him, Miguel observed. General don't like nobody. Doesn't like anyone, Rebecca corrected automatically. Then to Alex, fine. You're here. You've nearly killed yourself getting here. The least I can do is give you the grand tour before you collapse. I'm not going to collapse. You're about to. But she was already adjusting her grip, taking more of his weight. Timothy, take Copper back to her stall. Miguel, go tell Jesus we have a guest for breakfast, and that he was right about me needing to be more careful. Yes, ma'am. They scampered off, the horses trailing behind them like oversized puppies. Rebecca looked up at Alex, who was closer now than she'd realized, his face inches from hers in the growing light. She could see the lines of pain around his eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw, the way his hair was mussed from the long walk. You're an idiot, she informed him. So I've been told. He smiled slightly. But I'm an idiot who wants to help. Then let's get you somewhere to sit before you fall over. And then you can tell me what was so important that you risked tearing your stitches open. She guided him toward the house, moving slowly, acutely aware of the way he leaned into her, trusting her to keep him upright. The sun was cresting the horizon now, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The barn, the corral, the main house with its sagging porch and peeling paint. It's beautiful, Alex said quietly. The ranch, in the morning light. Rebecca looked at her home through his eyes, at the fence that needed mending, the barn that wanted a new coat of paint, the house that was more patches than original structure. She saw it every day, knew every flaw, every place where they jury-rigged a solution because they couldn't afford a proper fix. But in the dawn light, with Alex seeing it for the first time, she could almost see what he saw, the way the land rolled gentle and green toward the hills. The old cottonwood standing sentinel by the creek. The corral where horses dozed in the early morning, tails swishing at flies that weren't even awake yet. Home. It's falling apart, she said honestly. We're holding it together with spit and prayers and stubbornness. It's worth fighting for, he replied. Before she could respond, the bunkhouse door banged open and the rest of the orphans poured out like water from a broken dam. 8 boys ranging from 12 down to 6, all talking at once, all demanding to know who the stranger was and why Timothy and Miguel got to play Great Escape without them. Boys! Rebecca's voice cut through the chaos. Inside. Wash up for breakfast. We have a guest. They stared at Alex with open curiosity, 8 pairs of eyes taking in his expensive clothes, his injured leg, the way he was leaning on Miss Rebecca like they were sweethearts. Is he your beau? Asked Charlie, the youngest, with the bluntness of a 6-year-old. No, he looks like a beau, observed Thomas, who at 10 considered himself an expert on such matters. He's here about the ranch, Rebecca said firmly. Now go wash up before Jesus feeds your breakfast to the pigs. They scattered, but not before she heard whispers about Miss Rebecca's fancy man and kissing in the barn that made her want to sink through the floorboards. Charming, Alex murmured. They're monsters, Rebecca muttered. Adorable, impossible monsters. She guided him up the porch steps, a challenge with his injured leg, and into the house. The kitchen was warm and smelled like biscuits and coffee and bacon sizzling in the pan. Jesus took one look at them and shook his head. Couldn't wait for her to bring you proper, could you? Apparently not, Alex admitted. He sank into the chair Rebecca guided him to with poorly concealed relief. I apologize for the intrusion. No intrusion. Jesus set a cup of coffee in front of him. Any man stubborn enough to walk 5 miles on a torn-up leg is either crazy or serious. Either way, he needs feeding. The boys thundered in, marginally cleaner, definitely louder, and squeezed around the table like sardines in a can. Rebecca found herself pushed into the seat next to Alex, their shoulders touching, his legs stretched out beside hers onto the table. This is everyone? Alex asked, looking around at the organized chaos. This is everyone, Rebecca confirmed. Jesus and me. 8 boys. 1 falling apart ranch. And you've kept it running for 2 years. We've kept it breathing, she corrected. Running is a generous description. Breakfast was the usual controlled disaster. Boys talking over each other, hands reaching for biscuits, Jesus refereeing disputes over who got the last piece of bacon with the weary patience of a saint. Through it all, Alex watched everything with those dark, observant eyes, asking quiet questions, learning names, making each boy feel seen. When Jimmy, age 8 and missing his 2 front teeth, asked if Egypt really had mummies, Alex launched into a story about ancient tombs that had every boy at the table hanging on his words. Even Rebecca found herself listening, charmed despite herself by the way he made history come alive. And that's why you never disturb a pharaoh's rest, he finished solemnly. Unless you want 1,000 years of bad luck. Wow, breathed Charlie. You know everything. Hardly. Alex smiled. I just know a little about a lot of things. After breakfast, Rebecca knew she should make him rest, should insist he elevate his leg and stay off it. But he'd come all this way to see the ranch, and stubborn pride made her want to show him. Not the falling apart version she saw every day, but the version that was worth fighting for. Come on, she said, helping him to his feet. You wanted the grand tour. Let's see if you can survive it. They started with the barn, a massive structure that had been built by her grandfather with timber from the old-growth forest that used to cover the hills. It leaned slightly to the left now, and several boards were newer than others, but it was solid where it counted. How many horses? Alex asked, running his hand along a stall door. 15 working horses. 3 for breeding. Copper and a few others for personal riding. Rebecca led him down the center aisle, pointing out each animal. This is Sterling. He's 23 and mostly retired. And this is Moonbeam. Terrible name, I know, but Charlie named her and he was 5. It's a fine name, Alex said seriously, and Rebecca suspected he was hiding a smile. They visited the chicken coop, a ramshackle affair held together with wire and hope, where 20 hens scratched and pecked. The vegetable garden where tomatoes and beans grew in neat rows, tended by the boys. the smokehouse where they cured their own bacon, the well with its cranky pump that had to be coaxed like a stubborn mule. With each stop, Rebecca saw Alex taking it all in, not just the buildings and animals, but the way everything worked together. How the boys had different chores based on age and ability. How they'd rigged a pulley system to make hauling water easier for the smaller ones. How every scrap of wood, every bit of wire, every resource was used and reused until it literally couldn't serve anymore. "It's remarkable," he said when they reached the corral. He was leaning heavily on the fence, his leg clearly paining him, but his eyes were bright with genuine admiration. "What you built here, what you maintained. We haven't built anything," Rebecca protested. "We're just trying to keep what my parents built from falling apart completely." "You've built a home," Alex corrected, "for 8 boys who had nowhere else to go. You've built a family." She didn't know what to say to that, so she showed him the horses in the corral instead. Young ones being trained, old ones enjoying retirement, everything in between. "This is what they want," she said quietly. "All this land. There's oil under it. We know that. We've known for years." Papa refused to sell, said the land was worth more than whatever they could pull out of it. He was right. Alex turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I see that now. This isn't just about property rights or mineral extraction. This is about preserving something rare, something valuable in ways that have nothing to do with money. Then help me keep it." The words came out before she could stop them, raw and desperate. "You said you would." "Court is in." She glanced at the sun, calculating. 6 hours. "Help me prove those documents are lies." "I will." He reached out, his hand covering hers on the fence rail. "I promise you, Rebecca. We'll prove it together." Behind them, 8 boys and one knowing Mexican foreman watched from the barn door. Timothy elbowed Miguel in the ribs. "Told you," he whispered, holding hands again. "Think they'll kiss this time? Not with us watching. Want to bet?" Rebecca heard them, but didn't care. The sun was climbing higher. The court date was approaching like a runaway train, and she had an injured Egyptian lawyer/something else standing beside her, promising to fight for her home. It was possibly the worst plan she'd ever had. It was also the only one she had. "Come on," she said, squeezing his hand once before letting go. "Let's get you inside and elevated before your leg falls off. We have work to do." "Yes, ma'am," he said, and the smile he gave her was worth every sleepless hour, every worry, every risk, even if she'd never admit it. Especially not with 8 orphan boys watching and giggling like the world's most enthusiastic audience. Chapter 5. The Courthouse. Absolutely not. Rebecca stood in the doorway of her bedroom, staring at the dress Jesus had laid out on her bed like it was a rattlesnake coiled to strike. "It's your mama's dress," Jesus said from behind her, his voice brooking no argument. "The one she wore to church and town meetings. The one that says, 'I am a respectable landowner, and you will take me seriously.' It's—" Rebecca touched the fabric, deep blue cotton with tiny white flowers, a modest collar, proper sleeves. It was beautiful. It was also completely impractical. "I can't ride in this. You're taking the wagon, and you're wearing the dress." Jesus crossed his arms. "You want that judge to see a rancher's daughter or a wild thing who robs stagecoaches?" "I'm a wild thing who robs stagecoaches. Today you're a lady defending her property." He pointed at the dress. "Now put it on before I get the boys to hold you down and do it for you." Rebecca wanted to argue, but she could see the determination in his eyes. This mattered to him. Presenting her properly, honoring her mother's memory, showing the town that the Darby ranch was still standing strong. "Fine," she muttered, "but if I trip and break my neck in this thing, I'm haunting you first. I'll take my chances." 20 minutes later, Rebecca descended the stairs feeling like an imposter in her own skin. The dress fit perfectly. Jesus must have let it out slightly since her mother had been smaller in the shoulders, but it felt strange after years of split skirts and work clothes. The fabric swished around her ankles. The waist was cinched properly, and she'd even managed to tame her wild hair into something resembling a respectable bun at the nape of her neck. She found them all in the kitchen. Jesus finishing the breakfast dishes, the boys supposedly cleaning up but actually engaged in a spirited argument about whether a scorpion could beat a rattlesnake in a fight, and Alex sitting at the table, his injured leg propped on a second chair, going through the documents one more time. He looked up when she entered, and his expression made her stomach flip. The coffee cup he'd been holding stopped halfway to his mouth. His dark eyes went wide, traveling from her face down to her feet and back up again with an intensity that made her skin warm. For a long moment, he just stared, seemingly struck speechless. "You're—" He set the cup down carefully, like he wasn't quite sure his hands were working properly. "Rebecca, you're beautiful." The kitchen went completely silent. 8 boys stopped arguing mid-sentence and turned to stare. Jesus smiled behind his hand. Rebecca felt her cheeks flaming. "It's just a dress." "It's not just a dress." Alex stood, or tried to, forgetting about his injured leg until Rebecca rushed forward to steady him. But he didn't sit back down. Instead, he just stood there, his hand on her arm, looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You look like you should be painted, like one of those portraits in museums." "Miss Rebecca is gonna marry Mr. Alex," Charlie announced with the certainty of a 6-year-old who thought he'd figured out the whole world. "They're definitely gonna kiss," Timothy added sagely. "In front of the whole town, probably," Miguel contributed. "Outside, all of you." "Now." Jesus brandished a wooden spoon like a weapon. "Those weeds in the garden aren't going to pull themselves. And if I hear one more word about kissing, you'll be pulling weeds until Christmas." The boys scattered like startled quail, their laughter floating back through the open door. But Rebecca could hear them clearly enough. "Bet you 2 bits they kissed before noon." "You're on." "I say it happens at the courthouse." "I say they already kissed and just didn't tell us." Rebecca groaned and covered her face with her hands. "I'm going to murder them. All of them. Starting with the oldest and working my way down." "They're just excited," Alex said, and she could hear the amusement in his voice. "Young romantics. They're menaces." She lowered her hands to find him still looking at her with that expression that made her insides twist in complicated knots. "Stop staring. You're as bad as they are." "I can't help it." He said it simply, without apology. "You're beautiful, Rebecca. You should hear it more often." She didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to respond to the sincerity in his voice or the way his eyes had gone soft at the edges. So she did what she always did when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. She changed the subject. "We need to hitch up the wagon," she announced, stepping back and smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. "Court's at noon. That gives us just over 3 hours to get there and prepare." "About that." Alex reached for the documents on the table. "I've been going through these again. There are more discrepancies than you initially found. Dates that don't align, signatures that vary in pressure and slant, suggesting different hands tried to forge the same person. And this survey," he pulled out the map. "The more I look at it, the more convinced I am that whoever drew this has never been to Texas, let alone your ranch. Can you prove it?" Rebecca moved closer, forgetting about the dress and her embarrassment. "In court, I can raise enough reasonable doubt to delay any decision." His finger traced the incorrectly marked creek. "But to truly prove fraud, we need witnesses. People who can testify about your father's whereabouts, about the witness signatures being impossible, about the land itself. Most of those people won't come to court." Rebecca's heart sank. "They're ranchers, Alex. They don't like town, don't like lawyers, and definitely don't like getting involved in other people's business." "Then we'll work with what we have." He met her eyes steadily. "You, Jesus, the hotel records from San Antonio. It's not perfect, but it's a start. And if it's not enough, then I'll think of something else." He said it with such calm certainty that Rebecca almost believed him. "I promised I'd help you keep this ranch. I don't break my promises." Jesus appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on his apron. "Wagon's ready. I hitched up Molly and Sam. They're the steadiest we got. And I packed you some lunch in case this runs long." "You're not coming?" Rebecca asked, surprised. "Someone's out to watch the boys. Keep them from burning down the barn while you're gone." He looked between her and Alex, his weathered face unreadable. "Besides, this is your fight. Yours and his. I'm just the old man who makes biscuits." "Jesus, go." He shooed them toward the door. "And Rebecca, your mama would be proud of the woman you've become, of how you're fighting for what's yours." Rebecca's throat went tight. She crossed to him and kissed his leathery cheek. I'll make you proud too. You already have, Mija. Every day, getting Alex into the wagon proved more challenging than Rebecca had anticipated. His leg was stiff from the long walk that morning, and the high wagon seat required maneuvering that made him grit his teeth in pain. I could just ride, he suggested after the second failed attempt. On what? A horse you can barely mount? Rebecca positioned herself beside him. On three. 1, 2. She boosted him up with more force than strictly necessary, and he landed on the seat with a grunt that was half pain, half surprise. There, she said, brushing off her hands. Was that so hard? My dignity may never recover. But he was smiling as he said it. Rebecca climbed up beside him, much more gracefully in the dress than she'd expected, and took the reins. The briefcase full of documents sat between them like a wall, or a reminder, or both. The boys had assembled in a ragged line by the garden, supposedly pulling weeds, but actually waving like they were seeing off soldiers to war. Bring us back candy, Charlie shouted. Don't let nobody steal our ranch. Tommy added. Kiss him. That was definitely Timothy. Rebecca snapped the reins harder than necessary, and Molly and Sam started forward with the patient plod of horses who'd made this journey 1,000 times before. The morning was already growing warm, the sun climbing higher in the sky, so blue it hurt to look at. The road to town cut through rolling grassland dotted with mesquite and live oak, past other ranches where cattle grazed and horses switched their tails at flies. For a long while, they rode in silence. Rebecca was acutely aware of Alex beside her, the way his shoulder occasionally bumped hers when the wagon hit a rut. The scent of the soap he'd used that morning mixed with something else, something warmer that was just him. You're nervous, he said finally. I'm terrified, she admitted. That judge, Morrison, he's not from here. Came from back east last year. He doesn't know the land, doesn't know the people, and he's already shown he favors business interests over family claims. Rebecca guided the horses around a particularly deep rut. Last month he ruled against the Hendersons, said their land claim was invalid because the original deed had a smudged date. Never mind that the Henderson family had been on that land for 30 years. So he's a stickler for documentation. He's a jackass. The word slipped out before she could stop it, and she half expected Alex to be shocked. Instead, he laughed. You have a gift for cutting to the heart of things, he said, still smiling. I have a gift for calling things what they are. Rebecca glanced at him. Which is why I need to know, can you really help? Or are you just telling me what I want to hear? The smile faded from his face, replaced by something more serious. I can help, whether it will be enough. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The documents are clearly fraudulent. I can prove that. But proving fraud and winning the case are different things. Much will depend on the judge's willingness to listen. And if he's not willing, then we find another way. Alex's hand moved to rest on the briefcase between them. There's always another way, Rebecca. Sometimes it just takes time to see it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this handsome, mysterious man who'd tumbled into her life would somehow make everything right. But years of fighting alone, of making hard decisions with no one to rely on but herself, made trust difficult. As if reading her thoughts, Alex said quietly, I know you don't have reason to trust me. I work for the man trying to take your land. I came here with documents meant to steal your home. But I'm asking you to trust me anyway. Just for today. Just for this. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you care? This isn't your fight. You could walk away. Well, limp away. And nobody would blame you. I could. He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon where the town was beginning to appear as a smudge against the blue sky. But I won't, because what's being done to you is wrong. Because those boys deserve to keep their home. Because he stopped, seeming to wrestle with something internal. Because Rebecca prompted. Because you matter, he said simply. This ranch matters. And I may not be able to fix everything that's broken in this world, but I could try to fix this one thing. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. She focused on the road ahead, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes that had nothing to do with dust. Okay, she said finally. I'll trust you. For today. That's all I'm asking. They rode on in more comfortable silence after that, the tension between them easing like a knot slowly unraveling. Alex told her about his journey from Egypt to New York to Texas, painting pictures with words of ocean crossings and train rides, and the shock of seeing Texas for the first time, so different from the desert he'd known. Rebecca found herself relaxing despite the looming court date, letting his voice wash over her like a familiar song. He had a gift for storytelling, for making far-off places seem real and immediate. When he described the pyramids at sunset, she could almost see them. When he talked about the Mediterranean Sea, she could almost smell the salt air. "You miss it," she observed. "Egypt, sometimes." He shifted again, wincing slightly. "But I've learned that home isn't always about where you're from. Sometimes it's about where you're needed. And where you needed." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her heart stutter. "I'm beginning to think I might be needed here." Before Rebecca could respond, before she could even process what that meant, the town came into full view. Dry Creek wasn't much to look at. A main street of dusty storefronts, a saloon that doubled as the hotel, a general store, a church with a steeple that listed slightly to the left, and a courthouse, a two-story brick building that was by far the grandest structure in town. And standing on the courthouse steps, talking with two men in suits that screamed Eastern lawyer, was Sheriff Tom Briggs. Rebecca's hands tightened on the reins. "That's the sheriff." She pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the courthouse. The sheriff looked up, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Rebecca. But the smile faltered when he noticed Alex beside her. "Miss Darby." Sheriff Briggs tipped his hat as he approached. "Didn't expect to see you in town today. Thought you'd be out at the ranch with all those boys." "Court date, Sheriff." Rebecca kept her voice steady. "Property dispute." His eyes slid to Alex, taking an expensive suit, the injured leg now visible as Alex carefully lowered himself from the wagon. "And who might this be?" "Alessandro Farrick," Alex said, extending his hand. "I'm representing Miss Darby in this matter." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "I thought you were the lawyer for the other side." "The Egyptian fellow." "There's been a development." Alex's grip on the sheriff's hand was firm, his expression pleasant but unreadable. "I've reviewed the documents in question and found discrepancies." "Discrepancies." The sheriff's tone suggested he'd heard that before and wasn't impressed. Then his eyes landed on Alex's leg, on the way he was favoring it, on the slight bulge where bandages wrapped his thigh beneath his trousers. "That's a nasty limp you got there. How'd that happen?" Rebecca's heart stopped. This was it, the moment where everything could fall apart. But Alex just smiled, easy, unconcerned, like they were discussing the weather. "Accident while traveling to the ranch. My horse spooked, and I took a tumble. Rather embarrassing, actually. Horse accident." The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny thing, we had a stagecoach robbery a few days back. Driver said one of the bandits discharged a rifle, and he thought maybe someone got hurt. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The silence stretched out like taffy. Rebecca could feel her pulse hammering in her throat, could see the two Eastern lawyers watching with vulture-like interest. Then Alex laughed, a genuine self-deprecating sound that made even the sheriff blink in surprise. "Sheriff, the robbery was, let's call it a planned demonstration." "Oh, what now?" "Miss Darby was testing my mettle," Alex said smoothly. "Wanted to see if I was serious about helping her. So she arranged a little theatrical production with some of the ranch hands. Things got out of hand, the rifle discharged accidentally, and..." He shrugged. "Here we are." It was the most audacious lie Rebecca had ever heard. It was also, she realized with dawning admiration, brilliant. It explained the injury, acknowledged the robbery, and framed it as something between a prank and a loyalty test. Eccentric frontier behavior that wouldn't surprise anyone who knew ranch culture. The sheriff looked between them, clearly skeptical but unable to poke holes in the story. "A test of your mettle." "Precisely." Alex's smile never wavered. "I passed, if you're wondering, though I wouldn't recommend the method." "And the briefcase?" The sheriff's eyes were sharp. "Driver said they took a briefcase. Full of fraudulent documents," Rebecca said, finding her voice. "Which Mr. Farrick is now helping me expose. The whole robbery was my way of getting the evidence I needed to fight the claim on my land." She could see the sheriff working through it. The strange story, the unlikely alliance, the injured lawyer who seemed entirely too calm about the whole thing. Finally, he shook his head. You frontier folks. But there was amusement in his voice now. Always got to do things the hard way, don't you? It builds character, Rebecca said sweetly. Build something. He looked at Alex one more time. So no robbery to investigate? No masked bandits to hunt down? Just a misunderstanding between business associates, Alex assured him. Though I appreciate your diligence in pursuing the matter. The sheriff grunted, clearly not entirely satisfied, but willing to let it go. Well, good luck with your case, Miss Darby. You're going to need it. He nodded to Alex. Mr. Farrick. He ambled away, leaving Rebecca and Alex standing in the morning sun. That was insane, Rebecca breathed once the sheriff was out of earshot. You just lied to a lawman about a stagecoach robbery. I presented an alternative interpretation of events, Alex corrected. One that happens to be true from a certain point of view. A certain point of view? You did test my mettle. Things did get out of hand. The rifle did discharge accidentally. He smiled at her. Everything I said was technically accurate. You're dangerous, Rebecca said, but she was smiling too. Remind me never to play poker with you. Noted. He offered her his arm. Shall we? We have a ranch to save. She took his arm, acutely aware of the way her hand fit into the crook of his elbow, the way he adjusted his pace to match hers despite his injury. Together, they climbed the courthouse steps, the briefcase of fraudulent documents swinging between them. At the top, Rebecca paused and looked back at the town, at the dusty street, at the horses tied to hitching posts, at the sky so blue and wide it seemed to go on forever. This was it. The moment everything changed, one way or another. She looked up at Alex, at this unexpected ally who'd stumbled into her life 3 days ago and somehow become essential to it. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming, for helping, for not running away when you had the chance. Where else would I be? He asked, and the way he looked at her made her believe, just for a moment, that everything might actually work out. Then the courthouse doors swung open, and a clerk called out, Darby property case. Court's in session. Rebecca squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked into the courthouse with Alessandro Farrick at her side, ready to fight for everything she loved. Behind them, the town of Dry Creek went about its business, unaware that inside that brick building, the fate of 8 orphan boys and 1 stubborn rancher's daughter hung in the balance. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a storm approaching, or just the sound of destiny rolling in like a freight train with no brakes. Chapter 6, The Courtroom. The Dry Creek courthouse smelled of lemon oil, old wood, and the nervous sweat of people whose lives hung in the balance. Rebecca had been inside exactly 3 times in her life. Once for her parents while reading, once when old Silas McKenna contested her water rights, he lost, and now. The courtroom was smaller than she remembered, with high windows that let in shafts of dusty sunlight and pews that had probably been salvaged from some defunct church. At the front, Judge Morrison's bench loomed like an altar of judgment, dark mahogany polished to a hostile shine. The judge himself hadn't arrived yet, but his presence seemed to permeate the room anyway, an austere, no-nonsense force that made even the bravest ranchers speak in hushed tones. Rebecca smoothed her blue dress for the 100th time, her palms damp despite the relatively cool morning. Alex sat beside her at the defendant's table, his injured leg stretched out carefully, his expression calm and focused as he organized their documents with methodical precision. On the other side of the aisle, 2 lawyers in expensive Eastern suits whispered to each other, occasionally glancing over with expressions that ranged from smug confidence to barely concealed disdain. Behind them sat a man Rebecca had never seen before, portly, sweating despite the temperature, with nervous eyes that darted around the courtroom like a cornered animal. That's Gerald Finch, Alex murmured, following her gaze. He's the one who gave you the documents. He looks guilty. He should. He is. Alex's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The question is whether we can prove it in the next hour. Before Rebecca could respond, a door at the back of the courtroom opened, and Judge Ezekiel Morrison entered like a king taking his throne. He was exactly as she remembered, tall and thin, with steel gray hair, wire-rimmed spectacles, and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile sometime around the Civil War. "All rise," the bailiff called. The scraping of chairs and rustling of clothing filled the room as everyone stood. Rebecca's knees felt weak, but Alex's hand found the small of her back, steadying her with a touch so light it might have been accidental. It wasn't. Judge Morrison settled into his chair with the careful movements of a man who had turned routine into ritual. He surveyed the courtroom over his spectacles, his pale eyes missing nothing. "Be seated." His voice was dry as old paper. Case number 437, Consolidated Egyptian Mining Company versus Rebecca and Darby, regarding mineral rights and land title to the Darby Ranch property. Counsel, are you ready to proceed? The lead lawyer for the mining company, a sharp-faced man whose nameplate read Howard Blackwell, Esquire, stood with oily confidence. "Yes, Your Honor." The plaintiff is prepared to present clear documentary evidence that Miss Darby's deceased father sold the mineral rights to our client in a legal and binding transaction. Miss Darby, the judge's eyes found her, and Rebecca felt pinned like a butterfly to a board. "Do you have representation?" "I do, Your Honor." Alex rose smoothly despite his injury, and Rebecca noticed several people in the gallery lean forward with interest. He cut an impressive figure even with a limp, tall, commanding, with an air of authority that seemed to fill the room. Alessandro Farrick, representing Miss Darby. Blackwell's head snapped around so fast Rebecca heard his neck crack. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Mr. Farrick was originally retained by our client to facilitate this very transaction." "Is this true, Mr. Farrick?" The judge's tone suggested he found the whole situation distasteful. "It is, Your Honor." Alex's voice remained perfectly level. "I was initially hired by Mr. Gerald Finch to represent what I was told was a straightforward property transfer based on a previous sale. However, upon reviewing the documentation more carefully, I discovered significant irregularities that compelled me, as an officer of the court, to withdraw from that representation and instead assist Miss Darby in exposing what I believe to be a systematic fraud." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morrison's gavel came down like a gunshot. "Order. I will have order." He glared at Alex over his spectacles. "Those are serious allegations, Mr. Farrick. I hope you have evidence to support them." "I do, Your Honor." Alex gestured to the documents spread before them. "Extensive evidence. Then let's hear it. Mr. Blackwell, present your case." What followed was an hour of legal tedium that made Rebecca want to scream. Blackwell droned on about mineral rights law, presented his fraudulent documents with flowery language about clear chains of title and properly executed contracts, and generally made it sound like Rebecca's claim to her own land was nothing more than a childish misunderstanding. Rebecca's fingernails dug into her palms. Beside her, Alex took careful notes, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, Blackwell concluded with a flourish. "The evidence is clear, Your Honor. The sale was legal, the documents are in order, and Miss Darby's continued occupation of the property is, frankly, theft of our client's rightful assets." Theft. The word escaped Rebecca before she could stop it. She was halfway out of her chair before Alex's hand on her arm pulled her back down. "Easy," he murmured. "Let me handle this." Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Miss Darby, you will control yourself in my courtroom. Mr. Farrick, do you wish to cross-examine the plaintiff's witnesses?" "I do, Your Honor. But first, I'd like to address the documents themselves." Alex stood, gathering the papers Blackwell had submitted. "May I approach the bench?" "You may." Rebecca watched as Alex limped to the judge's bench, his movements careful but confident. He spread the documents out where both the judge and Blackwell could see them. "Your Honor, let's start with this deed of sale, dated March 15th, 1884. His finger traced the date. "Mr. Blackwell claims this represents a legal transfer of mineral rights from Thomas Darby to the Consolidated Egyptian Mining Company." "That's correct," Blackwell said impatiently, "as the document clearly states." "Indeed, it states many things." Alex pulled out another paper, one of Rebecca's annotated copies. "However, Miss Darby has provided testimony, supported by hotel record from the Minger Hotel in San Antonio, that her father was not in Texas at all during March of 1884. He was in San Antonio helping his brother rebuild after a fire. Hotel records can be falsified, Blackwell said smoothly. They can, but the Minger is a reputable establishment with meticulous record keeping. I have here, Alex produced a telegram. Confirmation from the hotel manager that Thomas and Rebecca Darby were registered guests from March 1st through March 31st, 1884. The manager remembers them specifically because young Rebecca celebrated her 11th birthday in the hotel dining room. Rebecca's throat went tight. She hadn't known Alex had contacted the hotel, hadn't known he'd gathered that evidence. Judge Morrison examined the telegram. This is compelling, Mr. Farrick, but hardly conclusive. Perhaps Mr. Darby made arrangements before traveling. An excellent point, Your Honor. Which brings me to the signature. Alex held up the deed to the light streaming through the windows. Thomas Darby's signature on genuine documents, including his will, which I know Your Honor has on file, features a distinctive loop on the capital D. Large, flowing, quite unmistakable. This signature, he pointed to the deed, has no such loop. The D is cramped, hesitant. This was signed by someone attempting to forge Thomas Darby's hand, but who lacked either skill or access to sufficient samples. Blackwell's face was reddening. That's speculation. It's expert analysis, Alex corrected coolly. I have some experience with forgery cases. Would you like me to continue? Please do, Judge Morrison said. And for the first time, Rebecca thought she detected a hint of interest in his dry voice. The witness signatures. Alex pulled out another document. This sale was supposedly witnessed by Samuel Wright and Martha Henderson. However, Samuel Wright died in 1883, a full year before this document was allegedly created. And Martha Henderson, he looked directly at Rebecca. Would you care to explain about Mrs. Henderson? Rebecca stood on shaking legs. She was my godmother, Your Honor. She died when I was 9. In 1882. Both witnesses were deceased before this document was supposedly signed, Alex said quietly. Unless Mr. Blackwell's client has discovered a method of raising the dead, these signatures are impossible. The courtroom erupted again. Judge Morrison didn't even try to quiet it immediately. His eyes fixed on the documents with an expression that made Blackwell start to sweat. Your Honor, Blackwell sputtered. We were assured by our land agent that these documents were authentic. Your land agent. Alex turned to where Gerald Finch sat, looking like he wanted to melt into the floor. Mr. Finch, would you care to explain to the court how you came to possess documents signed by dead people? Finch's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. No. Then perhaps you'd like to explain this. Alex produced the survey map, spreading it across the judge's bench. This survey, supposedly conducted in September of last year, shows Willow Creek running west of the old Cottonwood landmark. Miss Darby, which direction does Willow Creek run? East, Your Honor. Rebecca's voice was stronger now. It's run east of that Cottonwood for as long as anyone can remember. Any surveyor who actually walked the land would know that. Any surveyor who existed, Alex agreed. The signature on this survey belongs to one Robert Callahan, licensed surveyor. I took the liberty of checking with the Texas Board of Surveyors. No Robert Callahan has ever been licensed in this state. Judge Morrison removed his spectacles and cleaned them with deliberate slowness. A gesture Rebecca suspected meant he was furious and trying to control it. Mr. Blackwell, these are serious irregularities. Your Honor, we relied in good faith on the documents provided by our agent. Your agent who is currently looking like he'd prefer to be anywhere else. The judge's voice could have frozen fire. Mr. Finch, stand up. Finch rose on trembling legs. Did you create these documents? Your Honor, I was approached by. There were assurances that Finch was visibly falling apart. I was told it was just a matter of formalizing what had already been agreed upon. Who approached you? Judge Morrison leaned forward. Who told you to create fraudulent documents? I can answer that, Your Honor. The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Every head turned as a man rose from the gallery, tall, imposing, with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than Rebecca's entire ranch. And you are? Judge Morrison demanded. Khalid ibn Rashid al-Masri. The man's accent was cultured, his bearing aristocratic. Senior counsel for His Royal Highness Prince Khalid al-Masri of Egypt. He paused, letting that sink in. And the actual party attempting to acquire the Darby property. Rebecca's world tilted sideways. Her eyes flew to Alex, who had gone very still. Your Royal Highness? Judge Morrison's eyebrows had disappeared into his hairline. Mr. Farrick, did you know about this? For the first time since entering the courtroom, Alex looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, Allow me to clarify. The silver-haired lawyer interrupted smoothly. The gentleman you know as Alessandro Farrick is, in fact, Crown Prince Alessandro ibn Khalid al-Masri, heir to the Egyptian throne and son of the man who commissioned this land acquisition. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Rebecca couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the words that were rearranging everything she thought she knew. Prince. Alessandro was a prince, an actual prince, and his father was the one trying to steal her land. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his face. The way he held himself, the ingrained authority she'd noticed but attributed to education. The expensive clothes, the cultured accent, the casual mention of pyramids and palaces. Not a lawyer from Egypt. A prince. Your Honor. Alex spoke quietly but with unmistakable authority. May I address the court? I think you'd better, Judge Morrison said grimly. Alex turned to face the room, and Rebecca saw something she'd never seen before, the prince beneath the disguise. He stood differently, spoke differently, became someone completely foreign. My father, he said clearly, is King Khalid al-Masri. He has extensive business interests around the world, including oil prospecting. When geological surveys suggested oil beneath the Darby property, he instructed his agents to acquire it. I was sent to facilitate what I was told would be a straightforward legal transfer. You lied to me, Rebecca whispered, but her voice carried in the silent courtroom. His eyes found hers, and the pain in them was real. I never lied about wanting to help you. That was always true. You just left out the part about being royalty. Her voice was rising, but she didn't care. About your father being the one trying to rob me. Rebecca, don't. She stood, her chair scraping loudly. Don't you dare Rebecca me. Everything, all of it was a lie. Not everything. He took a step toward her, forgetting his injured leg in his urgency. The wince of pain that crossed his face made her want to help him and hit him in equal measure. My feelings were real. My desire to help was real. Your Royal Highness. The silver-haired lawyer interrupted coldly. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Alessandro's voice cut like a blade. No more private discussions. No more secrets. He turned back to Judge Morrison. Your Honor, I withdraw any and all claims my family or their agents have made regarding the Darby property. The documents are fraudulent, as I've proven. Miss Darby is the rightful owner of her land, and she should remain so. Your Highness, the lawyer looked apoplectic. You don't have the authority. I have every authority. Alessandro drew himself up to his full height, and for the first time, Rebecca saw the prince he truly was. Not the charming lawyer who told stories to orphan boys, but a man born to command. I am Crown Prince of Egypt. When I give an order, it will be obeyed. The case is withdrawn. All claims are voided. Miss Darby keeps her land. Is that clear? The silence was absolute. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Well, that certainly simplifies matters. He looked at Blackwell and Finch. Gentlemen, I'm inclined to refer this matter to the district attorney for investigation of fraud. You'll both remain in Dry Creek pending formal charges. Finch made a sound like a dying rabbit. Blackwell started to protest, but one look at the judge's face silenced him. As for the property dispute, Judge Morrison continued. In light of the withdrawn claim and the clear evidence of fraudulent documentation, I rule in favor of the defendant. Miss Rebecca Darby is confirmed as the legal owner of the Darby Ranch and all associated mineral rights. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a finality that should have felt like victory. Instead, Rebecca felt like she was drowning. She turned and walked out of the courtroom. Not running. She had too much pride for that, but moving with a deliberate speed that discouraged pursuit. Behind her, she heard Alessandro call her name, heard his uneven footsteps as he tried to follow. She walked faster. Outside, the bright Texas sun was a shock after the dim courtroom. Rebecca made it to the wagon before her legs gave out, gripping the side for support as the world spun around her. A prince. He was a prince. And she was a rancher's daughter who'd robbed his stagecoach, stitched up his leg, and, God help her, started to fall for him. Rebecca. His voice behind her was quiet, careful. Please, let me explain. Explain what? She whirled on him and was dismayed to feel tears burning in her eyes. Explain how you've been lying to me since the moment we met? How every word out of your mouth was a performance. That's not fair. Fair. She laughed, and it came out bitter. You want to talk about fair? Your father tried to steal my land. You came here to help him do it. And her voice broke. I trusted you. You can still trust me. He moved closer, and she saw the desperation in his face. Rebecca, I didn't know about the forgeries. I genuinely believed the transaction was legal. When I saw the documents were fake, when I understood what was being done to you, you decided to play the hero? She swiped at her eyes angrily. Swoop in and save the poor little rancher while keeping your royal identity secret? Did you think I'd be so grateful I wouldn't care that you'd been lying the whole time? I wasn't lying about the things that mattered. His voice rose for the first time, matching her passion. I wasn't lying about wanting to help. I wasn't lying about admiring what you've built, what you've done for those boys. And I sure as hell wasn't lying about. He stopped, seeming to wrestle with something internal. About what? The words came out as a challenge. About caring for you. He said it quietly, but with such intensity that it hit her like a physical force. About thinking you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. About wanting to stay here, with you, instead of going back to Egypt and the life that's been planned for me since birth. Rebecca's breath caught. You don't mean that. I do. He took another step closer, close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the scent that was becoming dangerously familiar. I've spent 30 years being Alessandro the Prince, doing what's expected, marrying who I'm told to marry, living a life that belongs to everyone but me. And then I met you. This fierce, stubborn, beautiful woman who faces down impossible odds with nothing but determination and love for children who aren't even hers. You made me want something different. Stop. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please stop. Why? Because it's inconvenient? Because I'm a prince and you're a rancher and there's no storybook ending for us? He was close enough to touch now, and his hand came up to cup her cheek with a gentleness that made her want to weep. I don't care about convenient, Rebecca. I care about you. Your family will adjust, or they won't. Either way, it's my choice. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You fought so hard to keep your home, to protect those boys, to build something that matters. Let me fight for something too. Let me fight for this. For us. There is no us, she said, but the words lacked conviction. There can't be. I'm a man who's falling in love with you, he said simply. Everything else is just details. And then he was kissing her. His mouth found hers with a certainty that stole her breath, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined a first kiss should be. No tentative exploration, no cautious testing. It was fierce and desperate, and full of all the things he couldn't say and she couldn't bear to hear. Rebecca's hands came up to grip his shirt, and she wasn't sure if she was pushing him away or pulling him closer. Maybe both. The world narrowed to the taste of him, coffee and something sweeter, the warmth of his body against hers, the way he made a small sound when her fingers tangled in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she couldn't quite meet his eyes. I can't do this, she whispered against his shoulder. Alessandro. Alex. His voice was rough. Just Alex. Please. Alex. She tried to name, softer now. You're a prince. I'm nobody. This doesn't work in the real world. Then let's make a new world. He pulled back enough to look at her, his dark eyes intense. Stay with me. Let me stay with you. We'll figure out the rest. Before she could respond, the courthouse doors banged open and the silver-haired lawyer emerged, looking thunderous. Your Highness. His voice could have cut glass. We need to discuss this situation immediately. Your father will be most displeased. Then he'll be displeased. Alex didn't look away from Rebecca. I've made my decision. You've made a decision that affects the throne, the succession, international relations. I've made a decision that affects my life. Now Alex did turn, and the authority in his voice made even the lawyer step back. Tell my father I'll contact him when I'm ready. Until then, I'm exactly where I need to be. The lawyer opened his mouth, closed it, then turned on his heel and stalked away, muttering about youthful folly and international incidents. Rebecca watched him go, then looked back at Alex. You're really going to stay? Give up being a prince for... She gestured vaguely at herself, at the wagon, at the whole impossible situation. I'm not giving up anything, he said. I'm choosing something better. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Not the comfortable silence of the morning, but something heavier. Rebecca held the reins loosely, letting Molly and Sam find their own pace. Beside her, Alex sat with his injured legs stretched out, his profile thoughtful as he watched the Texas landscape roll past. I really didn't know, he said finally, about the forgeries, about what my father's agents were doing. I thought it was a legitimate business transaction. I believe you. And she did, surprisingly. But you should have told me who you were. When he turned to look at her, when you were stitching my leg and convinced I was the enemy, when the boys were playing Great Escape and treating me like one of their adventures, when you were showing me the ranch and I was seeing what a real home could look like. Any of those times would have worked. Would they? His voice was gentle. Would you have trusted me if you'd known I was Egyptian royalty? Or would you have assumed I was exactly like my father, someone who sees land as a commodity and people as obstacles? She wanted to say she would have given him a chance, but honesty made her admit, I probably would have shot you and left you for the wolves. Exactly. He smiled slightly. So I waited, kept waiting for the right moment. And then there never seemed to be one. There's one now. Now you hate me. I don't hate you. The words surprised her, but they were true. I'm angry. I'm confused. I'm terrified of what I'm feeling. But I don't hate you. His hand found hers on the seat between them, fingers intertwining with a natural ease that made her heart ache. What are you feeling? I don't know. But that was a lie, and they both knew it. She didn't know. She was feeling exactly what he'd accused her of, falling in love with a prince who kissed like he meant it and looked at her like she hung the moon. They crested the last hill, and the ranch spread out below them. Home, safe, still hers. The boys must have been watching for them, because suddenly they were pouring out of the barn and the bunkhouse, shouting and waving. They won. They won. Timothy's voice carried across the distance. I can tell by the way Miss Rebecca's sitting. She always sits different when she wins. Rebecca felt her lips twitch despite everything. How do I sit when I win? Like you own the world, Alex said quietly. Like nothing can touch you. It's magnificent. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house, and immediately they were surrounded by 8 excited boys, all talking at once. Did you win? What happened? Did you punch anyone? Did Mr. Alex do his lawyer magic? Did you kiss? That was definitely Charlie, and it earned him a swat from Thomas. We won, Rebecca announced, climbing down from the wagon. The ranch is safe. No one's taking it away. The cheers were deafening. The boys danced around like wild things, whooping and hollering. Even Jesus emerged from the house with a rare smile creasing his weathered face. Knew you could do it, he said, pulling Rebecca into a brief, hard hug. Your mama and papa would be proud. It wasn't me. Rebecca pulled back, looking at where Alex was being helped down from the wagon by 3 enthusiastic boys. It was him. He proved the documents were fraudulent. He withdrew his family's claim. Her voice caught. He saved us. Jesus followed her gaze, his dark eyes knowing. That's so? And what did this cost him? Everything, maybe. She watched as Charlie climbed onto Alex's back, carefully avoiding the injured leg, declaring himself prince of the ranch, while the other boys laughed. His father's respect, his position, his whole life. Sounds like a man who knows what matters. Jesus studied her face. Question is, do you? Before Rebecca could answer, Alex looked up and caught her eye. Even with Charlie on his back and Miguel tugging on his arm, demanding a story about Egyptian princes, his attention was entirely on her. The expression in his eyes made her breath catch, tender, hopeful, uncertain in a way she'd never seen him before. He mouthed two words, "I'm sorry." She found herself mouthing back, "I know." "Miss Rebecca." Timothy appeared at her elbow. "Mr. Alex is really a prince? Like with a crown and everything?" "Yes," she said slowly. "Really a prince." "That's so cool." Miguel bounced on his toes. "Does that mean we're friends with a prince? Can we tell people?" "I don't know what it means," Rebecca admitted. She looked at Jesus helplessly. "I have no idea what any of this means." "Means you got some thinking to do," Jesus said practically. "But first, you got some celebrating. We kept this ranch, Mija. That deserves a proper supper." He was right. For tonight, she could push aside the impossible questions. What came next? How this could possibly work? Whether princes really gave up thrones for ranchers. For tonight, she could celebrate victory and safety and the fact that 8 boys would grow up on the land her parents had loved. And if her eyes kept finding Alex across the yard, if her heart did complicated things every time he smiled at her, if she caught herself touching her lips and remembering the way he'd kissed her like she was his whole world, well, that was something she'd deal with tomorrow. Tonight, the ranch was safe. The boys were happy. And somewhere between the stagecoach robbery and the courthouse, between anger and trust, between loneliness and hope, Rebecca Darby had started to fall in love with a prince who chose her over a kingdom. She just wasn't quite ready to admit it yet. But tomorrow she might be. Chapter 7, The Telegram. Dawn came soft and pink over the Darby Ranch, painting the world in watercolor shades of hope. Rebecca had been awake for an hour already, feeding the chickens with automatic movements while her mind churned through everything that had happened yesterday. The courtroom, the revelation, the kiss. I'm falling in love with him. She touched her lips unconsciously, then cursed herself for the gesture. One kiss didn't change anything. He was still a prince. She was still a rancher. The fact that he'd withdrawn his family's claim was wonderful, but it didn't solve the fundamental impossibility of. The thunder of hoofbeats shattered her thoughts. A rider came tearing up the ranch road like the devil himself was on his heels. A young man Rebecca recognized from town, one of the telegraph office runners. His horse was lathered with sweat, and he practically fell from the saddle in his haste. "Telegram," he gasped, waving a yellow envelope. "Urgent telegram from Mr. Alessandro Farrick. The prince, he gulped air. Is he here?" "He's sleeping." Rebecca wiped her hands on her apron and reached for the telegram. "I'll see he gets it. It came all the way from Egypt, ma'am. Marked urgent." The operator said I should bring it right away, no matter the hour. "I understand. Thank you." She pressed a coin into his palm, more than the delivery was worth, but the boy had ridden hard. "Get yourself some water from the pump before you head back." He nodded gratefully and stumbled toward the well, his horse trailing behind him like an exhausted puppy. Rebecca stood in the growing light, the telegram burning in her hand like a live coal. It wasn't sealed. Telegrams never were, just folded. The words, "Urgent, Prince Alessandro," were scrawled across the front in the telegraph operator's hurried script. She shouldn't read it. It was private correspondence. Reading someone else's telegram was no better than opening their mail, and Mama had raised her better than that. But something in her gut twisted with foreboding. Just a glance, she told herself, just to see if it's truly urgent, if he needs to know immediately. She unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The words punched her in the stomach like a physical blow. "Marry the damn girl, stop, get on fastest ship, stop, I will order oil riggers immediately, stop, well played, Alessandro, stop your father." Rebecca read it once, twice, 3 times, each reading making the room spin faster. "Marry the damn girl. I will order oil riggers immediately. Well played." The telegram slipped from her nerveless fingers and drifted to the ground like a condemned man's last letter. She stared at it lying there in the dust, those terrible words still visible, still real, still destroying everything she'd started to believe. It was all a lie, not just the hidden identity, not just the convenient timing. All of it. Every word, every gesture, every moment of tenderness. It had been a plan. A scheme. A game played by a prince who was better at deception than she'd ever imagined. He hadn't withdrawn his father's claim out of honor or justice or feelings for her. He'd withdrawn it because he'd found a better way to get what his family wanted. Marry her. Gain control through marriage. Get the oil. Well played. She felt something crack inside her chest. Something she'd been protecting for 2 years, ever since her parents died, and she'd learned that the only person she could truly rely on was herself. She'd started to lower those walls for him. Started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face everything alone. Fool. She was such a fool. Rebecca picked up the telegram with hands that had gone steady with rage. The chicken squawked in protest as she strode past them, her boots eating up the distance between the barn and the cabin where Alessandro, Prince Alessandro, slept peacefully, probably dreaming about oil derricks and his father's approval and the stupid rancher girl he'd convinced to trust him. She didn't knock. The cabin door slammed open hard enough to bounce off the wall. Alex jerked awake with a startled sound, his hand automatically reaching for what? A weapon? His princely dignity? Get up. Her voice was ice. Get up right now. Rebecca. He blinked in the sudden light, confusion giving way to concern as he registered her expression. What's wrong? What happened? What happened? She laughed, and it sounded broken even to her own ears. What happened is your mail arrived. She threw the telegram at him. It fluttered through the air and landed on his chest like an accusation. Alex grabbed it, still clearly disoriented from sleep, his dark hair mussed and his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Under any other circumstances, she might have found him endearing. Now she just wanted to hit him. She watched his face as he read. Watched comprehension dawn. Watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked almost like panic. Rebecca, this isn't what? She kicked the bed frame hard enough to make it rattle. Isn't exactly what it looks like? Isn't proof that you and your father planned this whole thing? Marry the damn girl. That was the plan all along, wasn't it? No. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, forgetting about his injury in his urgency. The wince of pain that crossed his face gave her a savage satisfaction. Rebecca, I swear I didn't. You didn't what? Didn't plan to seduce me? Didn't kiss me yesterday, knowing full well your father expected you to marry me for the land? She was shaking now, fury and heartbreak warring for dominance. Tell me, Your Highness, was there a bonus if you got me to fall in love with you? Did your father offer extra money for making the conquest complete? Stop it. Alex stood, though his injured leg made him sway slightly. Just stop and let me explain. Explain what? The tears were threatening now, hot behind her eyes, and she'd be damned if she'd let him see her cry. Explain how I'm falling in love with you was just another lie. How every word out of your mouth since the stagecoach was part of some elaborate con to steal my land. I never lied about my feelings. His voice rose to match hers. Everything I said yesterday was true. I do care about you. I do want to stay. Well played, Alessandro. She quoted the telegram with bitter precision. Your father seems to think you executed the plan perfectly. And why wouldn't he? You had me so twisted around, I was actually starting to believe. Her voice broke. I was starting to believe you actually chose me over your kingdom. I did choose you. He took a step toward her, and she backed away like he was poison. Rebecca, whatever my father thinks, whatever he's planning, it has nothing to do with us. With what I feel, there is no us. The words ripped out of her like a scream. There was never an us. There was just a prince playing a long game and a stupid rancher who fell for it. You're not stupid. I am. She was shouting now, and somewhere in the back of her mind she knew she'd wake the boys, wake Jesus, wake the whole damn county. She didn't care. I'm the stupidest woman in Texas because I actually believed you. I believed the concern in your eyes when you looked at the boys. I believed the way you talked about wanting something real. I believed that kiss meant something. It did mean something. Alex's composure was cracking now, too. Desperation bleeding through. It meant everything. Rebecca, I know how this looks, but you have to believe me. I sent no word to my father. I made no plans. Whatever he's ordering, it's because he assumes I'm playing his game. But I'm not. I swear to you, I'm not. Why should I believe you? The question came out small, broken. Give me one reason why I should believe a single word you say. Because he stopped, seeming to search for words that wouldn't come. Because I would never hurt you. Because those boys mean the world to me. Because this ranch, this life you've built, it's the first real thing I've experienced in 30 years of palace politics and arranged marriages and duty above all else. Pretty words, but her voice wavered. You're good at those. They're not just words. He moved toward her again, and this time she was too tired to back away. Rebecca, look at me. Really look at me. Against her better judgment, she did. His eyes were wild, his hair disheveled, his shirt still unbuttoned and rumpled from sleep. He looked nothing like a prince and everything like a man watching his world collapse. He looked like she felt. I love you, he said simply. I know you don't believe me. I know this telegram makes everything look like a lie. But I love you, and I'm not leaving unless you make me. I'm not marrying you for land or oil or my father's approval. If you'll have me, and I know that the hell of an if right now, I'd marry you because I can't imagine my life without you in it. For a moment, one fragile, dangerous moment, Rebecca wanted to believe him, wanted to throw herself into his arms and pretend the telegram didn't exist, that his father's plans didn't matter, that love could somehow conquer the impossibility of their situation. Then reality crashed back in. Get out. Her voice was flat, dead. Get out of this cabin, get off my ranch, and go back to Egypt where you belong. Rebecca, I mean it. She met his eyes and made sure hers showed nothing but ice. I want you gone. Today. Now. I never want to see you again. I won't go. You can't make me leave. Can't I? She drew herself up to her full height, channeling every ounce of her mother's steel will. This is my land. My home. You're trespassing. I can have the sheriff remove you if necessary. Or, the thought struck her, cruel and effective. Or I can tell everyone in Dry Creek that you lied under oath in that courtroom, that you're not really helping me. You're just executing a plan to steal my land through marriage. How do you think Judge Morrison would feel about that? How long do you think it would take for your father's grand scheme to crumble? His face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. She held his gaze, unflinching. I've fought too hard to keep this ranch, to lose it to a silver-tongued prince who thinks he can seduce his way to an oil fortune. You have until sunset to be gone. After that, I start talking to the sheriff. The silence stretched between them like broken glass, sharp, jagged, cutting them both. Fine. Alex's voice was barely above a whisper. If that's what you want. It's what I want. Another lie. But what was one more lie in a relationship built on them? He gathered his things in silence. The expensive suit he'd arrived in, now wrinkled and dusty. The documents from the court case. The few personal items he'd accumulated during his stay. Rebecca watched from the doorway, arms crossed, face impassive. Only when he limped past her, still favoring the leg she'd stitched, the leg that bore her careful work, did her composure waver. Your leg, she said despite herself. You shouldn't ride with it barely healed. I'll manage. His voice was as cold as hers now. I'm surprisingly good at managing. Your Highness willing to do whatever it takes for what I want. Isn't that what you think of me? The words stung because they were her own thrown back at her. She lifted her chin. Jesus will ride with you. To bring the horse back. Of course. Wouldn't want me stealing a horse on top of everything else. Alex, don't. He stopped at the threshold, not looking at her. Don't say my name like it means something. Don't pretend any of this meant something. You made it very clear what you think of me, what you think this was. I'll honor that. I'll leave. I'll go back to Egypt and marry whatever princess my father chooses and live the life you seem convinced I was always going to live anyway. That's what you were always going to do, she said, but it came out less certain than she wanted. You're right. He finally turned to face her, and the devastation in his eyes nearly broke her resolve. I was going to do exactly that, right up until I met a stubborn rancher who taught me what it felt like to choose something for myself. But apparently that was just a fairy tale too. He walked out before she could respond, his limp more pronounced now, probably from the anger and the haste and the leg that wasn't ready for this kind of stress. Rebecca stood in the cabin doorway, watching as he crossed the yard to where Jesus was already saddling 2 horses. The old foreman must have heard the shouting, must have known this was coming. His weathered face showed no surprise, only a deep sadness that made Rebecca want to scream. The boys were awake now too, pouring out of the bunkhouse in various states of dress, their young faces confused and worried. "Miss Rebecca?" Timothy's voice was small. "Where's Mr. Alex going?" "Away." She couldn't manage more than that single word. "But why?" "We just won. We saved the ranch. He's supposed to stay." Charlie's face crumpled. "He promised to teach me about pyramids." "He lied." The words tasted like ash. "He lied about everything." She watched Alex mount, watched Jesus help him, steady him, hand him the reins with a gentleness that made her throat tight. Watch him sit straight in the saddle despite the pain it must be causing. He didn't look back at the cabin, didn't look back at her. But just before he rode out, he said something to Jesus, too quiet for her to hear. The old foreman nodded, clapped him once on the shoulder, and then they were riding away. Down the long drive, past the cottonwood tree, toward the main road that would take him back to town, back to a ship, back to Egypt and a life of duty and arranged marriages and everything she'd convinced herself he'd wanted to escape. The boys clustered around her, asking questions she couldn't answer, offering comfort she couldn't accept. She stood frozen, watching until he disappeared over the rise, until there was nothing left but dust settling in the morning sun. Only then did she allow herself to move, to walk back to the cabin on legs that felt like water, to sit on the edge of the bed where he'd slept, where she'd found him this morning, where everything had shattered. The telegram lay crumpled on the floor where it had fallen. Rebecca picked it up with trembling hands, reading it one more time as if the words might have changed. They hadn't. "Marry the damn girl." "Well played, Alessandro." "Miss Rebecca?" Miguel's voice from the doorway, tentative. "Are you crying?" She touched her cheek and found it wet. When had she started crying? "No," she lied. "Just dust in my eyes." "Oh." He didn't sound convinced. "Jesus says breakfast is ready, and that you should come eat even if you're not hungry. He says—" The boy hesitated. "He says sometimes the heart needs feeding same as the body." Rebecca wanted to tell him that her heart was fine, that she didn't need feeding or comfort or anything except to be left alone with her justified anger and righteous pain. Instead, she stood, wiped her face, and followed Miguel to the house where 7 other boys waited with worried eyes, and Jesus had already set out her favorite coffee cup. She would eat. She would drink coffee. She would go about her day, tending the ranch and the animals and the boys who depended on her. She would not think about dark eyes and gentle hands and a kiss that had tasted like promises. She would not wonder if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. She would not imagine Alessandro on that ship back to Egypt, favoring his injured leg, marrying some princess he didn't love because Rebecca Darby had been too afraid to believe in fairy tales. She wouldn't. But as the sun climbed higher and the day stretched out empty and victorious and utterly hollow, Rebecca sat at the table she'd shared with him just yesterday and finally admitted the truth she'd been avoiding. She loved him, despite everything, despite the lies and the telegram and the impossible situation. She loved him, and she just sent him away forever. The coffee tasted like regret. The victory felt like defeat. And somewhere in the distance, she could still hear the echo of hoofbeats carrying away the only man who'd ever made her believe in something more than survival. Gone. And it was entirely her fault. Chapter 8. The Choice. 3 days. 3 days since Alessandro had ridden away, and Rebecca felt like she was moving through water, slow, heavy, everything muted and distant. The ranch ran itself through sheer momentum. The boys did their chores with unusual silence, shooting worried glances at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Jesus cooked meals she barely tasted and said nothing, though his dark eyes held a knowing sadness that made her want to scream. She'd won. The ranch was hers, free and clear. The orphans were safe. Everything she'd fought for was secured. So why did victory taste like ashes? Rebecca stood at the corral fence in the fading light of the 3rd evening, watching Copper nose at the water trough. The mare had been restless since Alex left, like she was waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. "I know how you feel," Rebecca murmured, reaching out to stroke the horse's soft nose. "Miss Rebecca?" She turned to find Timothy and Miguel approaching with identical expressions of determination that would have been amusing under different circumstances. "We need to talk to you," Timothy announced with the gravity of a judge pronouncing sentence. "About?" But she already knew. "Mr. Alex." Miguel crossed his thin arms. "You made a mistake. I did what I had to do. You sent away the best thing that ever happened to this ranch." Timothy's voice cracked with passion. "He loved you. We all saw it. And you love him too." "I don't." The lie stuck in her throat. "It's complicated." "No, it ain't," Miguel said firmly. "He made you smile. You made him happy. And then you read some stupid telegram and decided to be scared instead of brave." The words hit like a slap. "I'm not scared. You're terrified." Jesus's voice came from behind her. She turned to find the old foreman approaching, his weathered face stern. "You've been terrified since your parents died. Terrified of losing the ranch. Terrified of failing the boys. And most of all, terrified of letting someone in who might leave you like your mama and papa did. That's not fair, isn't it?" He moved to stand beside her at the fence. "You've been so busy protecting your heart that you didn't stop to think maybe it was worth the risk." "He lied to me." The words burst out. About who he was, about everything. He hid his title, Jesus corrected. But did he lie about caring for the boys? About wanting to help? About how he felt about you? Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, because the answer, the honest answer, was no. "That telegram," she said weakly. "His father expected him to marry me for the land. His father expected a lot of things." Jesus pulled a folded paper from his pocket, like expecting Alessandro to come home, to give up this foolishness, to remember his duty. "What is that?" "Telegram that came yesterday. For you." He handed it over. "I waited to give it to you. Thought maybe you needed time to sit with your anger first." With trembling hands, Rebecca unfolded the paper. "Prince refuses return stop, says he will not marry without love stop, says Rebecca Darby. Worth more than kingdom stop, father furious stop, sending this without permission stop, call it IBN, Rashid, El Masri Senior Counsel." Rebecca read it twice, 3 times. "He didn't go back to Egypt? He's in San Antonio," Jesus said quietly. "Been there 3 days. Refusing every order from his father. Refusing to board the ship. Just waiting. Waiting for what? For you to remember that bravery isn't just about fighting for what you have." Jesus's hand came down on her shoulder, gentle and firm. "It's about fighting for what you could have too." But the first telegram, his father said, "Marry the damn girl," well played, because his father assumed Alessandro was playing a game. Timothy had crept closer, his young face earnest. But Mr. Alex wasn't playing. He was just being real for the first time. "How do you know that?" Rebecca's voice came out choked. "Because he told me." Miguel produced a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "He gave me this before he left. Said to give it to you when you were ready to listen." Rebecca took the paper with shaking hands. It was a hastily scrawled note in Alex's elegant handwriting. "Rebecca, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But I need you to know the truth, even if you never believe it. I didn't write to my father about marrying you. I didn't ask for oil riggers or approval or anything else. What he said in that telegram was his assumption, his plan that he thinks I'm executing. I'm not. If I marry you, and God, how I want to marry you, it won't be for land or oil or duty. It will be because you're the bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever met. Because you've shown me what it means to build something that matters. Because when I'm with you, I'm not a prince or a lawyer or anything except a man who's finally found home. I love you. I will love you whether you believe me or not, whether you send me away or not, whether I ever see you again or not. But I hope, I desperately hope, that someday you'll be ready to take a chance on something as terrifying and impossible and absolutely worth it as us. Yours, if you'll have me, Alex." The paper blurred as tears spilled over. Rebecca tried to wipe them away, but they kept coming, weeks of grief and fear and loneliness finally breaking free. "He's in San Antonio," she whispered. "For 3 days. Waiting," Jesus confirmed. "Like I said, I sent him away. I said terrible things. I told him I never wanted to see him again. Then I guess you better ride fast and tell him you're a liar. Timothy said matter-of-factly. Because you're good at a lot of things, Miss Rebecca, but lying ain't one of them. Rebecca looked at the boy, at all of them, these children she'd taken in and loved and built a life around. What if he won't forgive me? What if I hurt him too much? Won't know unless you try, Miguel said with the simple wisdom of the young. But I bet he will, because he loves you even more than you love him. And that's saying something. How would you know how much I love him? Because you're crying. Charlie had joined the group, his 6-year-old face solemn. You never cry, not even when you broke your arm fixing the barn roof. But you're crying now. He was right. She was crying, great, gulping sobs that shook her whole body. For her parents. For the loneliness of the last 2 years. For the fear that had kept her from admitting what her heart had known since Alessandro had looked at her in the courthouse and said, "You matter." What do I do? She looked at Jesus helplessly. How do I fix this? You get on copper, you ride to San Antonio, and you tell that Princey's a damn fool for loving you, but you're a bigger fool for sending him away. Jesus's weathered face cracked into the first smile she'd seen in days. And then you ask him to come home. What if? No more what ifs. He turned her bodily toward the barn. Just go, before I have to hogtie you and throw you on that horse myself. Rebecca made the ride in record time, pushing Copper harder than she should have, stopping only once to rest and water the mare. The whole way, her mind spun through what she'd say, how she'd explain, whether he'd even listen. San Antonio glowed with lamplight as she rode in just after midnight. The Minger Hotel stood grand and imposing on the plaza, its windows bright with the kind of luxury Rebecca had only glimpsed in passing. She must have looked wild. 3 days of heartbreak and a hard ride written all over her. The doorman took one look at her dusty split skirt and windblown hair and tried to stop her. I'm sorry, miss, but I need to see Prince Alessandro Al-Masri. The words came out breathless but firm. It's urgent. The prince is not receiving visitors. I don't care. Rebecca pushed past him into the ornate lobby, drawing stares from the well-dressed guests. Which room? Miss, I really must insist. The presidential suite, a smooth voice interrupted. Rebecca turned to find the silver-haired lawyer from the courthouse, approaching with an expression of profound irritation. Third floor, though His Highness has given strict orders not to be disturbed. Then he can be disturbed, Rebecca said. Which room exactly? The lawyer studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Suite 301. Though I suspect I'll regret this. As she turned toward the stairs, he added quietly, for what it's worth, I've never seen him like this. 3 days he sat in that room, staring at nothing, refusing food, refusing orders. You did quite a number on him, Miss Darby. Guilt twisted her stomach. I know. Then fix it. Or leave him be and let him go home to heal. But don't do this halfway. He deserves better. Rebecca didn't answer. Just took the stairs 2 at a time until she reached the 3rd floor, following the polished hallway to Suite 301. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What if he didn't want to see her? What if she'd hurt him too badly? What if? No more what ifs. She knocked. Silence. She knocked again, harder. Alessandro? Alex? It's Rebecca. I know you probably don't want to see me, but her voice cracked. Please, I need to talk to you. More silence. Then footsteps, slow, uneven. The sound of lock turning. The door opened. Alex stood there in shirt sleeves and wrinkled trousers, his hair disheveled, his face haggard. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which he probably hadn't. His dark eyes widened when he saw her. Rebecca. Her name came out hoarse, disbelieving. What are you doing here? I came to, now that she was here, the words tangled in her throat. Can I come in? He stepped back wordlessly, and she entered a suite that was probably worth more than her ranch. But she barely noticed the luxury. All she could see was Alex, standing in the middle of the room like a man waiting for execution. How's your leg? The words came out before she could stop them. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Still attached. Barely. You shouldn't have ridden so soon. The stitches. Rebecca. He cut her off gently. Why are you here? She took a breath. Then another. Then the words came tumbling out in a rush. I read your note. The one you left with Miguel. And another telegram came, from your father's counsel, saying you refused to go home. And I realized she pressed her hands together to stop them shaking. I realized I made a terrible mistake. What kind of mistake? The kind where I let fear make my decisions instead of, she met his eyes, instead of love. The silence stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Say that again, he said quietly. I let fear. The last part. I love you. The words came easier the second time. I love you, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. Sorry I read that telegram from your father and assumed the worst. Sorry I said those horrible things and sent you away when all I wanted was for you to stay. Alex stood very still, his expression unreadable. You sent me away because you thought I was trying to steal your land through marriage. I know. You said you never wanted to see me again. I know. Tears were threatening again. And I was wrong. About all of it. You never lied about the things that mattered. You hid who you were because you were trying to be someone real for once in your life. And I punished you for it. Rebecca, I'm not finished. She moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his face, the pain in his eyes. You asked me once to trust you, just for a day. And I did. And you saved my ranch and my home and everything I love. So now I'm asking you to trust me, to believe that I mean it when I say I love you, that I want you to stay, not because of the ranch or oil or anything except that I can't imagine my life without you in it. My father will never approve, he said softly. The Egyptian court will consider it a scandal. I'll lose my title, my inheritance, probably my family. I know. You be marrying a prince with no kingdom, a man with nothing to offer except himself. That's all I want. She reached for his hands, half afraid he'd pull away. He didn't. His fingers closed around hers like a lifeline. Just you, Alex. The man who tells stories to orphan boys and helps with chores even with an injured leg and looks at me like I'm worth more than a kingdom. You are worth more than a kingdom, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You're worth everything. Then come home. She squeezed his hands. Come back to the ranch and the boys and Jesus's terrible coffee and a life that's real and messy and absolutely imperfect. Come back to me. Rebecca, please. The word came out broken. Please, Alex. I know I hurt you. I know I have to earn back your trust. But I'm begging for the chance to try. He pulled his hands free, and for one terrible moment, she thought he was going to refuse. Thought she'd come all this way only to lose him anyway. Then his hands came up to frame her face, cradling it with a tenderness that made her breath catch. You never lost my trust, he said softly. You were scared and protecting yourself and everything you'd built. I understood that. Even when it broke my heart, I understood. So you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. You were right to question, right to be cautious. I should have told you who I was from the beginning. Should have trusted you with the truth. We both made mistakes. We did. He smiled then, that real smile she'd fallen in love with. So what do we do about it? We start over, Rebecca said. Right now. Clean slate. All right. He stepped back and executed a formal bow that was both elegant and slightly mocking. Miss Rebecca Darby, I am Crown Prince Alessandro Ibn Khalid Al-Masri of Egypt. I am heir to a throne I will never inherit because I've chosen love over duty. I am a passable lawyer, a terrible writer, and hopelessly in love with a rancher's daughter who's far too good for me. May I have the honor of courting you? Despite everything, Rebecca laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise them both. You may, though I should warn you, I'm stubborn, suspicious, and terrible at accepting help. I know. He straightened, still smiling. I wouldn't have you any other way. And I'm a rancher's daughter with 8 orphans and a falling-apart ranch. No dowry, no title, no family connections worth mentioning. Perfect, he said. I prefer substance over status anyway. And I love you. She said it clearly this time, without hesitation. Completely, terrifyingly, forever. Forever's a long time. Good thing I'm patient. Alex laughed and pulled her into his arms, carefully, mindful of his still healing leg. Rebecca went willingly, fitting against him like she was made for that exact spot. His heart beat steady against her ear, and she felt something inside her settle. Click into place. Home. I love you too, he murmured into her hair. In case that wasn't abundantly clear, it's becoming clearer. She tilted her head back to look at him. So what happens now? Now, he considered. Now I write to my father and make it official that I'm renouncing my claim to the throne. Now I pack my things and ride back to the ranch with you. Now I spend the rest of my life helping you raise those boys and fix fence posts and build something that actually matters. You make it sound simple. It is simple. He leaned down until their foreheads touched. Love you. Stay with you. Build a life together. Everything else is just details. What about your family? The scandal? Let them scandalize. His voice was firm. I've spent 30 years living for other people's expectations. Time to start living for my own. And what do you expect? Honestly, he pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I expect hard work and long days and children who track mud everywhere. I expect broken equipment and stubborn cattle and winters that try to freeze us solid. I expect arguments and mistakes and days when we're both too tired to remember why we fell in love. That's quite an expectation. I'm not finished. His hand came up to cup her cheek. I also expect laughter over breakfast and stories before bed and the kind of partnership where we face everything together. I expect to wake up every morning grateful that a stubborn rancher shot me and dragged me in her life. I expect to love you more every single day, even when you're impossible and I'm infuriating and we're both covered in dust and arguing about fence repairs. You really thought this through. I had 3 days with nothing to do but think. His thumb traced her cheekbone. 3 days of imagining every possible future. And they all led back to you. Rebecca's throat went tight. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything. He said it with such conviction that she almost believed it. You deserve happiness and partnership and someone who sees how remarkable you are. You deserve a man who'll fight for you as hard as you fight for everyone else. And that's you. That's me. He smiled. If you'll have me, I'll have you. She rose on her toes, bringing her lips close to his. Now and always and forever. I'll have you. The kiss was different from the one in the courthouse. Softer, sweeter, full of promise instead of desperation. His hands were gentle in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck. And for a moment, the whole world narrowed to just this. The taste of him, the warmth of his body against hers, the absolute certainty that this was right. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Rebecca rested her forehead against his shoulder. The boys are going to be insufferable, she murmured. Timothy's been taking bets on when we'd get married. Smart boy. Alex's chest rumbled with laughter. When are we getting married? Is that a proposal? Not yet. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. When I propose, it'll be proper. With a ring and everything. I don't need proper. I know, but you deserve it anyway. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Besides, I want to do this right. Court you properly. Let you get used to the idea of being loved by someone who's not going anywhere. I'm already used to it, Rebecca said. But she was smiling. Though I suppose a proper courtship couldn't hurt. Exactly. He kissed her forehead. Now, should we ride back tonight? Or wait until morning? Morning. She leaned into him. Copper needs rest. And honestly, so do I. Then stay. It wasn't really a question. There's a second bedroom. Or, he hesitated. Or I can get you a separate room, if that's more proper. Since when do we care about proper? Fair point. He guided her toward an overstuffed sofa. Sit. I'll order food. You look like you haven't eaten in days. I haven't. Not properly. She sank into the cushions with a sigh. Jesus tried, but everything tasted like dust. I know the feeling. Alex moved to the telephone, a luxury Rebecca had never used, and ordered what sounded like half the hotel's menu. When he returned, he settled beside her, his injured leg stretched out carefully. Does it hurt? She asked, nodding to his leg. Less than it did. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. The stitches held. You do good work. I was motivated. She studied their joined hands, his elegant and long-fingered, hers work-roughened and scarred. They shouldn't fit together, but they did. I kept thinking about you riding away, about how you could barely walk, and I'd sent you off anyway. Hey, he squeezed her hand. I made it. I'm fine. We're both fine. We are, aren't we? She looked up at him, this impossible, wonderful man who'd chosen her over a kingdom. We're actually going to do this. You're really coming back to the ranch. I'm really coming back. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. If you'll have me, all of me, the prince without a kingdom, the lawyer who switched sides, the man who's hopelessly in love with you. I'll have all of you, Rebecca said. Even the parts that make terrible decisions and get shot by orphan boys with ancient rifles. That was one time, and you'll never let me forget it? Never. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the tension of the last 3 days finally drain away. Though I suppose I owe Miguel a thank you. If he hadn't discharged that rifle, you might have made it back to Egypt before I realized what an idiot I was being. You're not an idiot. I sent away the man I loved because I was too scared to believe in fairy tales. Well, he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Good thing this fairy tale has a happy ending. They sat like that until the food arrived, a ridiculous spread of steaks and potatoes and fresh bread and pie. They ate sitting on the floor like children, trading bites and stories, and the kind of easy conversation that comes when all the walls finally come down. Rebecca told him about the last 3 days. The boy's worry, Jesus's knowing looks, her own misery masked as righteous anger. Alex told her about his father's increasingly frantic telegrams, the pressure from the Egyptian court, the moment he decided that no throne was worth giving this up. My father will disown me, he said matter-of-factly, chasing the last bite of pie around his plate. Officially and publicly. I'll lose access to family funds, my title, everything. Will you regret it? Never. He said it without hesitation. I'd rather be a penniless rancher with you than a lonely prince without you. You won't be penniless. Rebecca nudged his shoulder. Ranch hands get room and board. And if you're really good, maybe a small salary. Generous of you. I'm a generous woman. She set down her plate and turned to face him fully. Alex, are you sure? Really, truly sure? Because once you give this up, there's no going back. You'll be stuck with me and 8 boys and a ranch that's held together with wire and hope. I'm sure. He caught her face in his hands, his dark eyes intense. Rebecca, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I don't want the palace or the title or the political marriages. I want this. You. A life that's real. Then you'll have it. She covered his hands with hers. All of it. The good and the bad and the impossible. Together. Together, he echoed, and sealed it with a kiss. They rode out at dawn, 2 figures on horseback heading west toward a ranch where 8 boys were probably already awake and watching the road. Rebecca sat tall on copper, her hair loose and flying in the wind, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Beside her, Alex kept pace on the horse Jesus had loaned him, his injured leg clearly paining him, but his face content. Think the boys will forgive me for leaving? He asked as the ranch came into view. They never blamed you. Rebecca glanced at him. They blamed me. Said I was being stubborn and scared. Smart boys. The smartest. She could see figures now, small shapes pouring out of the bunkhouse and barn. Alex, are you ready for this? For 8 enthusiastic children and a foreman who probably wants to lecture me about proper courting? He grinned. I can't wait. The boys reached them before they'd even dismounted, a tangle of excited voices and grabbing hands and questions coming so fast they blurred together. You came back. Did you kiss her? Are you getting married? Can I be in the wedding? Does this mean you're staying forever? Forever and ever. That was Charlie, his small face so hopeful it made Rebecca's throat tight. Alex slid down from his horse, awkwardly, favoring his leg, and immediately found himself surrounded by children. He knelt down, bringing himself to their level despite the obvious pain it caused. Yes, he said clearly, I'm staying forever and ever. If that's all right with you gentlemen. The cheer was deafening. Boys piled on top of him in a tangle of hugs and laughter, and Rebecca watched as the crown prince of Egypt, the man who'd given up everything for love, disappeared under a wave of orphans who'd just gotten their family back. Jesus appeared at her elbow, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. You did good, Mija. Almost didn't. She watched as Alex extracted himself from the pile and stood, Timothy on his back and Miguel clinging to his arm. I almost lost him because I was too scared to believe. But you didn't. Jesus squeezed her shoulder. You found your courage. That's what matters. He gave up everything for me. He gave up a life he didn't want for a life he did. The old foreman's voice was gentle. That's not sacrifice. That's choosing happiness. Rebecca looked at Alex, at this impossible, wonderful man who was now explaining to Charlie why no, they couldn't have a pyramid in the backyard, and felt her heart swell with something too big for words. He caught her eye over the sea of boys and smiled. Mouthed 3 words, "I love you." She mouthed them back, "I love you too." All right, all right." Jesus clapped his hands. "You monsters give Mr. Alex some breathing room. Chores don't do themselves. And someone needs to help me with breakfast." The boys scattered reluctantly, though Timothy lingered long enough to whisper loudly, "You better marry her proper, Mr. Alex, or we'll all be very disappointed." "Noted," Alex said solemnly. Finally, they were alone as you could be on a working ranch with 8 boys and a foreman pretending not to watch from the kitchen window. "So," Rebecca said, suddenly shy, "you're really here. I'm really here." He moved closer, taking both her hands in his. "Forever, if you'll have me. I'll have you." She squeezed his hands. "Though I should warn you, life here is messy. Complicated. Not at all what you're used to. I'm counting on it." He pulled her close, and she went willingly, fitting against him like she always did. Like she always would. "Rebecca Darby, you robbed my stagecoach, stitched my leg, saved my soul, and stole my heart. I'd say you're stuck with me now." "Good." She tilted her face up to his. "Because I have no intention of letting you go. Now or ever." "Now or ever," he echoed. And then he was kissing her, right there in the dusty ranch yard with 8 boys whooping from the windows and Jesus chuckling in the kitchen and the morning sun painting everything gold. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't a kingdom. It wasn't anything the world would consider impressive or valuable or worth giving up a throne for. It was just a falling apart ranch in Texas, held together by love and hope and the stubborn determination of people who refused to give up on each other. It was perfect. It was home. And when Rebecca finally pulled back, breathless and laughing, and saw the promise of forever in Alex's dark eyes, she knew with absolute certainty that this messy, impossible, absolutely real life was worth more than all the kingdoms in the world. "I love you," she said again, because she could now. Because he was here and staying and hers. "I love you too," he replied. "Now and always and forever." "Forever's a long time." "Good." He kissed her again, softer this time. "I plan to spend every moment of it with you." And somewhere in the distance, 8 boys cheered and Jesus muttered about young fools in love, and the ranch kept turning like it always had. Messy and imperfect and absolutely, wonderfully alive. Or perhaps the beginning.